Grandma's inheritance changed everything after my parents kicked me out and preferred my sister because of a missing bracelet. My sister was always given preference by my parents, who once expelled me for having a lost bracelet. They therefore arrived at my house in tears years later when my grandmother delivered me the family's inheritance in lieu of her. I grew up in a modest suburban home with 2 parents and a younger sister, which is what most people would consider a standard middle-class family. We appeared to be a picture-perfect family to outsiders. However, anyone who knew us well would tell you that my parents and I were constantly at odds. The explanation was straightforward. I was usually the last thing on their mind, and they loved my younger sister Emma. However, it wasn't always that way. I recall how devoted and kind my parents were to Emma and me when we were young. They lavished us with love, and for good reason. We were a rather intelligent couple who were excellent at everything. Nothing seemed to separate us during the golden age we shared. Both of us participated in gymnastics, art classes, and piano lessons, and our parents were equally pleased with us. There was no little favor for one of us over the other, and I never experienced any tension. But when I started 6th grade, everything changed. There was only one test at first. I received a poor grade, the first in my life, even though it wasn't a very significant one. It was sufficient for my parents to start viewing me in a different light. It was obvious to me that something had changed. When Emma brought home another flawless score, my mother wouldn't give me the same look that she gave Emma. While Emma's accomplishments were greeted with sincere pride, the praise they used to give me began to feel forced. All of a sudden, Emma was the one who could do no wrong and I was the loose thread that could unravel at any time. I initially believed it to be a passing phase. Perhaps I was being overly sensitive. However, it was impossible to ignore. I was held accountable for any mistakes I made, no matter how minor. Emma's mistakes were dismissed or, worse, forgiven. "She's just having an off day," my dad used to say. "Why can't you be more like Emma?" was my constant question. I was plagued with the statement during my adolescence. Emma became the daughter my parents had always desired as we grew older. She was gregarious, intelligent, and well-liked. She was the popular girl, the homecoming queen, and the class president. Conversely, my introversion increased. I studied hard, remained to myself, and succeeded in my own unique way. However, it was never sufficient to rival Emma. I eventually gave up trying. The disparities in our treatment had become starkly apparent by the time we were in high school. Emma always had her own car, brand new clothes, and all the attention. Our parents would spend hours sitting with her when she needed homework help, making sure she grasped every step. If I sought assistance, they would either dismiss me and instruct me to solve the problem on my own, or it would be too late in the evening. They had begun to treat Emma like a princess and treat me like an adult. Emma had everything given to her, but I quickly realized that if I wanted something, I would have to work for it. I made an effort to keep up my relationship with Emma in spite of the unequal treatment. She was my sister, after all, and I cherished her. However, it becomes increasingly difficult to overlook her increasing entitlement. Knowing she could get away with anything, she appeared to enjoy the attention. Emma was loved by more people than just my parents. Her allure enthralled our friends, instructors, and even complete strangers. I was the background darkness, and she was the shining girl. I started to question whether others truly viewed me for who I was or if I was merely Emma's sister. The pivotal moment occurred one summer following my high school graduation. I was eager to leave the house and start over after receiving a partial scholarship to a respectable college. I believed that my parents and I may get along better with some space and that they would eventually miss me when I was gone. I was mistaken. At this point, Emma began dating Jake, our high school football team's standout quarterback. He was well-liked, attractive, and from a rich family. Naturally, my folks adored him. They regarded him as though he were their son. My parents would prepare extravagant dinners to impress Jake, who spent every weekend at our place. They were obviously already looking forward to the day when Emma and Jake would tie the knot, start a family, and have the ideal grandchildren. I was working part-time to help pay for the expenses my scholarship didn't cover while I was having trouble getting through my first semester of college. Emma and Jake's most recent excursions or Emma's academic performance were the only topics I heard when I returned home after breaks, fatigued. Nobody inquired about me or my situation. They would also say sarcastic things like, "Why can't you find someone like Jake?" What remained of our family dynamic was devastated by the charges that followed. I came home for a visit one weekend when I was off from college. Before Emma's new bracelet, a gold charm bracelet that Jake had given her, vanished, everything appeared to be as usual. Emma was upset, and it was a costly item. In a state of complete panic, my parents tore the house apart in an attempt to find it. Emma speculated that perhaps I had taken it when they were unable to locate it. I initially believed her to be kidding, but she wasn't. The previous evening, she claimed to have witnessed me ogling the bracelet and hinted that I might have removed it out of envy. I was enraged. Her bracelet was untouchable by me. I hadn't given it a second consideration. My parents, however, believed her without hesitation. Of course, I objected. My folks wouldn't listen, even though I vowed I hadn't taken anything. They thought I had stolen it to get even. In fact, my father once remarked, "We always knew you were jealous of Emma." That was the most painful thing they had ever uttered. It seemed as though the years spent striving to be a good daughter and gain their approval had been in vain. They threatened to leave the house unless I returned the jewelry. What I was hearing was unbelievable. They didn't believe me even though I had my word and no evidence of my innocence. Their decisions had already been made, so I went out. I didn't turn around after packing my things and leaving the house. I severed all contact with them. I had no other option. I couldn't continue to live in a home where I was treated like a criminal for no fault of my own. To help me get back on my feet, I found a friend to stay with. I didn't talk to my parents again for years after that. Without the help of my family, I struggled in the ensuing years. I was left to do it all by myself. I struggled to make ends meet while balancing employment and education. On some days, I didn't think I would make it, but I did. After graduating, I secured a respectable career and gradually began to establish a life for myself. Emma was doing well in the meantime, according to mutual friends. She had secured a lucrative position at a marketing company, and she and Jake remained together. She had gotten into it with my father's help. For them, nothing appeared to have changed. Without me, they were still the ideal family. I didn't hear from my family for 5 years. My life had to be rebuilt from the ground up. My grandmother, my dad's mother, specifically, was the only one who provided me with any kind of assistance or spiritual support. I was unexpectedly invited to my grandmother's Christmas dinner. To put it mildly, I was taken aback. The only member of the family who had ever treated me fairly was my grandma. She never mentioned my parents or made an effort to get me to make amends with them, but she did occasionally send me a birthday card or text to check in after everything that had transpired. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go when I received the invitation, but I had a gut feeling that I should. It was like entering a time capsule when I got to the supper. Along with a few other family members, my parents, Emma, and even Jake were present. There was a noticeable tension. Emma pretended that nothing had ever happened between us, and my parents gave me a harsh welcome. They seemed to be expecting me to put the past behind me and comply with their ideal family act. I made it through the terrible night. My grandmother then began distributing gifts toward the end of the evening. I didn't have any big expectations, but my heart almost stopped as I opened the box. A gold locket, an ancient family relic that had been handed down through the years, was found within the box. The jewelry wasn't just any jewelry. This locket was thought to be the legitimate heir to the family's possessions. Grandma was giving it to me directly, ignoring her son, my father, and all the other grandchildren, including Emma, who had inherited it from her father. It represented more than merely custom. It implied that everything my grandparents had, including their home, land, and savings, would eventually belong to me. When my parents realized what had happened, I could see their faces become white. In stunned quiet, Emma, who had always been the golden kid, sat. I could sense the tension in the room as my parents rapidly changed their tone, trying to mask their amazement with fake grins. My parents quickly drew me aside after the awkward remainder of the meal. All of a sudden, they were remorseful, as though a few words of kindness could erase years of unfair treatment and neglect. They mentioned Emma's impending marriage and their desire for me to rejoin the family, for her benefit. However, I was aware. This was about money, not about love or family. Our family had always valued the heirloom, and they knew that I would be the one to inherit everything that went along with it now that I had it. They cared for me, thus they weren't worried about mending the relationship. They were concerned about their potential losses. In a tone that seemed more like a warning than an offer, my father even stated that they were prepared to forgive me for everything and begin anew. They seemed to have forgotten who had initially harmed them. Other family members also added their voices, advising me to exercise common sense. They insisted that regardless of what had previously transpired, family is everything, and that I should get back in touch with them. I could already hear the cliches piling up. You don't want to be alone, sharing is caring, and blood is thicker than water. I was overanalyzing the matter because of all this pressure, even though it was obvious what I should and shouldn't do. Knowing that they only appreciated me for what I now had, did I wish to rejoin this family? Given that their newfound interest in me was motivated by self-interest, could I forgive them? What recommendations do you have regarding this? If so, I'd be in dire need of some. First update. I felt overburdened when I returned to my flat following the Christmas celebration. It was difficult to take in all that had transpired. For the remainder of the evening, I made every effort to stay away from my parents and other family members, but they persisted in trying to come near to me. Emma would not quit grinning at me as though we were suddenly best friends, and my parents would not stop glancing at me with guilt. However, I was aware that their goals were more about the family riches connected to the artifact I had been given than they were about family. Their actions simply made me want to keep my distance. The days that followed were devoted to introspection. I understood that I needed to talk to Grandma in a suitable manner. The locket had useful applications in addition to its symbolic significance. It meant that I would get the family's possessions. Although I hadn't been searching for this, I needed clarification now that it was on my plate. I wasn't prepared to become entangled in family money and tradition without fully comprehending its significance. I was still anxious about bringing up the topic when I saw my grandmother. I asked her honestly what it all meant after thanking her for entrusting me with the relic. I wanted to be open and honest. I informed her that if it meant bringing me back into the instability I had fought so hard to avoid, I didn't want the family's riches. Although they weren't my top concern, I promised her that I would use the assets sensibly if they came my way. Grandma patiently listened. Then she explained something to me that I didn't fully comprehend previously. She had spent years observing all of this. She had witnessed the family's growing estrangement from her, particularly following the argument between my parents and myself. She clarified that she was aware of the dysfunctional family dynamics and the harsh treatment I had received, especially from Emma and my parents. She was even aware of the fact that Emma was always given a free pass while I had to work several jobs to make ends meet during my time in college. Grandma acknowledged that she hadn't gotten involved for so long because she thought individuals should be allowed to live their own lives. However, she realized that her assets needed to be transferred to the appropriate person after witnessing how things had turned out, how I had been mistreated but had still managed to create something for myself. Someone who wouldn't waste it or take it for granted. She picked me because of this. My name was on her will, which she had already made. Her honesty astonished me. The heirloom was no longer the only consideration. Trust was at issue. Grandma trusted me to take care of everything, and that duty felt significant and weighty. She reassured me that this was about entrusting the family's future to people she knew would uphold it, not about compensating me for what I had endured. Even though it seemed odd to find myself in this situation all of a sudden, I couldn't help but feel validated. Grandma had seen the truth, and it meant more than anything else, therefore all those years of being the forgotten daughter suddenly didn't matter. But although this made a lot of things clearer, it also made things more complicated. The inheritance remained a threat, and I was certain that my parents and Emma would do all in their power to regain control now that they were aware of the consequences. They had no intention of letting it go lightly. Second update. Hi everyone on Reddit. When I return with an update, the situation has gotten worse. If you have been following along, you are aware of how chaotic my family situation is. I was mistaken to believe that returning to school would bring me any calm. I went back to my flat in the hopes of escaping the drama following the Christmas debacle, in which Emma and my parents essentially begged for the family inheritance. I tried to ignore my family's incessant calls and texts by immersing myself in my work for a few days. Naturally, though, such tranquility was short-lived. Not only did Emma and my parents keep sending texts, but so did the rest of my family. Suddenly, relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years felt obligated to settle the conflict. They were all repeating the same phrases. Don't let money tear you apart. Family is everything, and, my personal favorite, you're being selfish. The fact that these relatives were unaware of the entire scenario only made matters worse. While Emma had it all and lived the ideal life, they were not around when my parents disowned me or when I had to scrounge for food and rent while attending college. They only cared about what they had heard from my parents, who were now neatly playing the victims, and didn't give a damn about the years of abuse. Their opinions suffocated me. Before things took a startling turn, I believed I could just ignore everything and concentrate on my work. Emma and my dad unexpectedly came up to my apartment one afternoon. You read correctly, they showed up at my house without my invitation. They seemed to have a purpose, which was to coerce me into making amends or something, of course on their terms. I could hear my mother sobbing from the hallway as they pounded on the door and called my name. I went cold. After several months of being with me, my friend appeared frightened, and I was at a loss for what to do. My parents began begging me in front of my pal as soon as I opened the door. My mother was crying as she talked about how they couldn't let me go and how we had to make things right. As though I had done something wrong, my dad said that they were willing to forgive me for everything. Emma, meanwhile, was standing there pretending to be worried, but I could see straight through her. She was more concerned about what would happen if I didn't agree to split the inheritance than she was about making amends. They weren't listening to me when I tried to keep the topic quiet and told them that this wasn't the right time or place for it. While my dad stayed in the doorway, refusing to leave, my mom virtually shoved past me in an attempt to enter the apartment. They kept interrupting me to talk about Emma's impending marriage and the necessity to restore the family's unity before that could happen. They tried to coerce me into agreeing to give up a portion of the future inheritance, which, mind you, I didn't even formally receive yet, by making it seem like I was the one destroying the family. It was a humiliating scene. My neighbors began to emerge from their rooms to observe the mayhem. I was doing everything I could to keep it quiet, but the more they lingered, the louder they became. Emma stood there looking smug, as though she knew they would finally wear me down, while my mom was on her knees pleading with me to forgive them. I was stuck and didn't know what to do. They refused to budge when I told them to go. After what seemed like hours of begging, I finally had enough and phoned security. Fortunately, security showed up right away. At first, they asked my parents to leave in a courteous manner, but they refused. Security had to step in at that point and threaten to call the police if they didn't leave. It was a whole new level of embarrassment. Before my parents ultimately gave in, my mother made a huge public announcement that I was leaving my home. Emma went one step farther, as if that wasn't enough. She informed a number of my friends via mass text after she left that I had deserted her and my parents. She cleverly omitted the part where they had disowned me for something I didn't even do, making it seem like I was the bad guy in this whole situation. I had to explain the entire thing to some of my friends because they were understandably perplexed. It was draining, and I was astounded by the extent Emma would go to in order to appear to be the victim. I'm not sure what to do right now. I'm attempting to move on and haven't spoken to my parents since that happened, but I can't help but watch over them because of their desperation. I feel like I'm being forced into a difficult situation where I have to give in order to please everyone else. However, I will never forget the way they treated me. However, the pressure is too much to handle. A part of me questions whether this will ever end or if I will have to live with it forever. It seems like my family is desperate to pull me back into their mess, even though right now I simply want to concentrate on me and my future. Third update, greetings once more Reddit users. Hold on tight, for after my last report, things have become considerably worse. To be honest, though, I wasn't sure I wanted anything to do with them anymore after everything. I couldn't help but wonder, what's keeping them from turning on me again if it was so simple to do so based only on a story? What assurance did I have that my parents wouldn't act in the same way if a new circumstance arose, given their ability to change their minds so swiftly in the past, supporting Emma and rejecting me? I felt as though I would have to be cautious around them all the time, wondering if their devotion to me was sincere or merely practical. I would want to put myself first and take a vacation from them all for the time being. Don't bring me back into their mess, let them handle it on their own. My parents also contacted me again after all of this, but they spoke in a different tone. They stopped pressuring me and making me feel guilty. They nearly apologized, but I could see they weren't sincere. In order to obtain the future inheritance, they were still concentrating on the money and trying to make things go as smoothly as possible. They were more concerned with maintaining appearances and ensuring financial stability than they were with actually repairing our relationship, particularly now that Emma's future wasn't looking as stable as they had planned. To be honest, I haven't replied to them and I'm not sure I will. Even if they come with an apology, I'm not prepared to open that door again because this entire event has served as a brutal reminder of how toxic my family can be. I'm concentrating on myself and the future I want to create on my own terms, free from the burden of their deceit and manipulation, for the time being. Reddit, that's enough for now. I appreciate all of your guidance and help during this journey. I feel like I'm now beginning to see things more clearly, even though it's been a difficult journey. My family didn't invite me to the reunion, so I showed up unannounced, shared my engagement news, and finally took a stand for myself. I am the youngest of 3 siblings and I am 28 years old. As a child, it was clear that I was the odd one out. There was always an obvious favorite, or favorites, I might say, among my parents. With their stable careers, large homes, ideal marriages, and those cute Christmas card families, my brother, 35M, and sister, 32F, were everything parents could boast about. My sister is a lawyer of some sort, and my brother works in finance. Both of them reside in lovely suburban communities with spouses who complement their professional backgrounds. Every family gathering is an opportunity for my parents to brag about their kids to friends and family. And then me. 2 years ago, I left my corporate position to launch a modest business of which I am really proud. I'm content with my life and earn enough money to live comfortably. Together, my 5-year boyfriend and I share a rental home. Even though we're not making a lot of money, we're doing okay. But my folks had a different perspective. Stable and traditional are terms they frequently use, and I suppose I don't suit that description. The subtle jabs about my hobby job, and remarks about how much better my life would be if I had persisted with a 9 to 5 have become unimportant to me. On the surface, we've always been courteous, but the tension has been for years. I didn't believe it was this horrible though. I came across my cousin's tale on Instagram a few weeks ago while perusing the platform. She appeared to be at a large family reunion. With all of the extended family gathered in one house, it was the type of gathering that my family often hosts a few times a year. There were my sister and brother, grinning with their partners. Except for me, my aunt, uncle and cousins were all tagged. I initially believed that I might have missed the group conversation. Perhaps the invitation got lost in all of my alerts. I sent my siblings an SMS. While my sister responds more slowly, she doesn't entirely ignore me, and my brother typically responds right away. Nothing happened for hours. I began to have the strange sensation in my chest that occurs when you know something is amiss but are reluctant to acknowledge it just yet. I called my mother the following day. I asked her how she was doing and if there had been a get-together, using a conversational tone. For far too long, the phone line went silent. She said, "Oh, the reunion? I didn't think you'd want to come. You're always so busy with your little business and everything." I took a moment to answer. I questioned her about why she thought I wouldn't want to attend. After all, my family is my family. She seemed to be trying to shrug the discussion aside as her voice became lighter. "We just didn't want to bother you, sweetheart. Besides, you've missed a few events before." Indeed, but primarily due to work, and not without informing them. As I persisted, it became increasingly evident that my absence was not an accident. They hadn't forgotten me. They had declined my invitation. Something about hearing it firsthand made my stomach plummet, and I'm not sure why. I hung up and sat there listening to the exchange again. I had previously experienced exclusion. Plans for many of the holidays seemed to center around my brothers' or sisters' families. I used to convince myself that it wasn't deliberate. Perhaps they didn't consider how I would fit into their plans because I didn't have children or a conventional lifestyle. I was unable to ignore it any longer, though, as I sat in my peaceful kitchen and watched my boyfriend work in the other room. This was intentional. My partner was incensed on my behalf when I told him, "You need to go anyway. They don't get to decide you don't belong there," he replied. He was correct. Why should I allow them to act as though I don't exist? I was tired of being treated like an afterthought by my family. Whether they liked it or not, I deserved to be a member of my family. The plan began to take shape at that point. I had been holding on to one card for weeks, and I hadn't played it yet. 2 weeks prior, my boyfriend and I had become engaged. I wanted to do it face to face with the people who should be concerned about my life, but we hadn't notified anyone. Now, though, I had my own motives. I would remind them of my presence if they were considering excluding me from my family. This time, they wouldn't ignore me. I made the decision to arrive without warning. I declined my boyfriend's, bless him, invitation to accompany me. I had to take care of this on my own. We devised a contingency plan, and he agreed to drive up and grab me if things didn't work out. If they didn't want me there, I would arrive and then depart, but not before telling them what I had to say. In order to make it appear as though I had always meant to attend, I prepared a large quantity of snacks to bring with me in the days before. For me, this wasn't about proving myself, even if my partner insisted that I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I had to be there for myself. I had had enough of fading away because they didn't think I belonged. I promised myself that if I had to leave, I would go, smile, and share my news. Although I had no control on their feelings toward me, I did have influence over how I responded to it. I refused to let them treat me like an outsider for once. Additionally, I would at least have closure if things didn't work out. First update. It took slightly over 3 hours to go to my folks' house. The majority of time was spent on how to appear unimpressed, as if I had simply happened to stop by since, well, I was aware of the family reunion. It seemed a bit ironic given why I was there, but the box of handmade cookies on the passenger seat smelled sweet and soothing. After checking the place twice, my partner assured me that he would be prepared to come get me if I needed a way out. I promised to keep him informed. The house was filled with automobiles parked on the lawn and along the driveway when I eventually pulled there. I inhaled deeply, picked up the treat box, and made my way to the front door. From within came the sounds of music, laughter, and clinking dishes. I stepped through the slightly open door. The noise stopped as soon as I entered. I knew they had all seen me without having to glance up. I sensed dozens of eyes swinging toward me as conversations broke off in the middle of sentences. My mother recovered first. She hurried over, her voice too happy and high. "Oh, you succeeded? How unexpected?" She merely patted my arm and moved away without giving me an embrace. Her eyes did not meet the phony warmth in her voice. There was an uneasy shuffle of movement in the room. People resumed their talks, but things had changed. Before my brother vanished into the kitchen, I saw him and my sister looking at each other across the room. Standing with her husband, my sister gave me a quick look before launching back into a boisterous discussion with other aunts. Across the room, I saw my cousin, the same person whose Instagram tale had given me the hint. Despite her apparent astonishment at seeing me, she nodded and smiled slightly. On the dining table, I set my package of goodies next to a spread of what appeared to be catered cuisine. Nobody even looked at my belongings. It hurt when I heard an aunt whispering to someone by the hallway, "Did they not invite her on purpose?" While I was moving through the room, I slipped by them into the living room after pausing to check my phone. My cousin drew me aside a few minutes later. She lowered her voice and looked over her shoulder. "They didn't think you'd come. Your parents, well, they didn't think you'd fit in here anymore." In spite of her apparent remorse, she said, "Fit in," as if I were a shattered puzzle piece in a family portrait. My dad was by the drink station when I left, but I can't recall what I muttered in response. I made the decision to give it a try. I questioned him why no one had told me about the reunion. As he filled the glass, he hardly raised his head to say, "We thought you'd be happier doing your own thing." The words hung thick in the air, yet it wasn't unkind. Since it was clear that I would not receive answers, I didn't press him any further. I didn't feel like making small chat with relatives who were acting as though they didn't see me, and the box of cookies I had brought was still unopened on the table. But it wasn't all bad. A few of my younger cousins approached to greet me. I felt a little better when they inquired about my company and mentioned that they had seen some of my work online. Someone cared about my life, at least. Once more, there was a bustle of talk in the room, and I sat down close to the corner and browsed through my phone idly. I simply needed time to think on what to do next. I didn't want to cause a scene. My sister's voice broke through the commotion at that point. Her face was beaming with joy as she clapped her hands. The room fell silent as she said, "Everyone, I have some news to share." And everyone's eyes shifted to her as she revealed she was expecting her second child. Cheers broke out. As everyone applauded, a few uncles made a joke about placing wagers on whether it would be a girl or a boy. My mother appeared as though she could burst with joy. Nobody gave me a sidelong glance. As I stood there, I heard the laughter and congrats. I seemed to have vanished once more. As usual, the same motif. The fact that I was present was irrelevant. The fact that I had arrived even though I hadn't been invited didn't matter. They would always treat me like an outsider and glorify my siblings. Something broke inside of me. I'm not sure if it was my dad's departure, the rumors I had heard, or the fact that my cookies were still unopened. Perhaps it was everything. I took a glass off the drink table and gave it a loud fork clink. Heads turned to face me as the room gradually became quiet once more. After enjoying the attention, my sister became irritated. I choose to disregard it. "Well," I continued steadily, "I have something to say too, since we're sharing big news." Second update. As soon as I walked in, the place was silent once more. All eyes were on me, all conversations halted, and forks froze in mid-air. But compared to when my sister revealed her pregnancy, the attention wasn't as enthusiastic or welcoming. I felt as though I had disturbed a sacred item. Despite my racing heart, I stood up and held my hand firm. "I just wanted to share some news of my own," I said. I raised my left hand to reveal the engagement ring, which sparkled in the light from the dining room. No one responded for a second when I said, "I got engaged 2 weeks ago." The silence was then broken by a few dispersed claps. From the side of the room, my little cousins, God bless them, cheered me on. The rest of the room remained motionless, as though they were still processing it, but a courteous uncle gave a nod of assent. Before forcing a faint smile, the kind she typically saved for strangers, my mom's face fell. "Why didn't you inform us earlier?" Her voice sounded more like an accusation than one of enthusiasm or inquiry. Her gaze flicked to the ring and then returned to me. "I didn't think twice," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I wasn't sure you'd care. I wasn't invited here, after all. I assumed you no longer wanted me to be involved in family matters." Discomfort spread throughout the room. Pretending to check their phones, people looked at each other or moved in their seats. After standing by the kitchen doorway, my brother moved forward and pushed off the frame. His voice was sharp, and his face was crimson. "You are not the focus of this. You have to put yourself first at all times. There was a response to that. A few whispered to themselves, "Not now." Yet I could sense that everyone was observing. My brother's crossed arms and intense gaze made it difficult for me to speak. So I did. "Really?" I shot back. "You all seem fine without me, but I don't remember getting an invitation to this little party. My engagement is as significant as the news of anybody else." The room became silent once more at that point. My sister refused to look at me since she was still blushing from her own news. My mother's courteous facade was beginning to crumble, and her face changed to one that was more recognizable. Annoyance. I saw her take a breath, likely to speak, but before she could, a voice broke the silence. One of my relatives remarked, "She has every reason to be angry." Her arms were folded as she sat close to the couch's edge. "What did you expect if you didn't invite her? That she would simply remain silent indefinitely?" Some people turned to look at my cousin. From the dining table came another voice. "Yes, it's not as though she's incorrect." I sensed a change for a split second. Although it wasn't much, it was sufficient. The fissures were visible. My mom shifted the topic, as she always does when she's cornered, likely understanding she was losing control of the situation. "Well, let's not forget how exciting it is that your sister is having another baby," she remarked, bringing a smile back to her voice. "The family is thrilled to hear that." There was a deflection, so clear. She was unable to give me this moment, not even for a brief moment. Immediately, the focus returned to my sister, who grinned broadly and thanked everyone once more for their congrats. My brother gave me a cocky grin like he was saying, "See? I was done." I took my phone out of my pocket and texted my lover, "Come get me," without uttering a word. I wasn't going to stay any longer than absolutely necessary. I picked up my handbag and made my way to the front entrance. Two of my younger relatives hurried after me, apologizing and inquiring as to where I was going. One of them hugged me and whispered, "You don't deserve this?" I returned the hug and assured her that I would be all right. It wasn't loud, but it was loud enough to hear my dad murmur, "Drama queen," from the side of the room as I was putting on my coat. I hesitated for a moment, but I didn't look back. Rather, I opened the door and went outdoors. The cool air cleared the heaviness in my chest and struck me like a jolt. One of my relatives came running out after me before I had gone halfway down the driveway. Her shoes crunched on the gravel as she jogged to catch up. "Hold on," she yelled. I paused and looked at her. She appeared embarrassed, almost as if she was at a loss for words. "I apologize," she blurted. "For everything." It was courageous. "In there you defended yourself. That was not how you should have been treated." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. I managed to say, "Thanks." Perhaps someone from inside asked what I was doing when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She rushed back toward the house after giving me one final pitying glance. After a few minutes, my boyfriend's vehicle arrived. I buckled my seatbelt, threw my purse on the seat and got in. I started crying as soon as I sensed the car moving. The tears flowed quickly and forcefully, like if I had been suppressing them for hours. My guy simply reached over and squeezed my hand without saying anything. As the trees beyond the window blurred by, I let it all out. The sobbing had subsided into soft sniffles by the time we drove onto the main road. Although I still felt raw and ashamed, there was also relief behind all of that. I hadn't just let it happen for the first time. I had raised my voice. Even if they didn't want to, I forced them to see me. Third update. At first, the only sound on the drive home was the hum of the road. As my fiancé drove, I gazed out the window, mentally reliving every moment of the recent reunion. I eventually opened up, discussing my brother's teasing, my dad's remark about my being a drama queen, my mother's disregard for me, and how my sister's pregnancy announcement had been the last straw. It all spilled out. With his palm resting on the gear shift, my fiancé listened and occasionally nodded. "You did the right thing," he added, looking over when I was done. "They have no right to declare you unimportant. We will proceed without requiring their consent." It was helpful to hear, yet I remained silent. My phone buzzed as we got close to home. I looked down. The cousin who had followed me out of the gathering had left me a message. "You were correct. For a long time, your parents have been discussing you behind your back." I straightened my posture. There was more to the message. "I apologize, but you must understand this. Your mother told everyone that your lack of a steady career makes you a disappointment. Additionally, she stated that your sister's announcement is far more significant than your engagement." It didn't seem fair to me. In an attempt to comprehend the words, I read them twice. I was still looking at the screen when I received a second message, this one containing screenshots. It came from a family catch-ups group chat, of which I had obviously been excluded. My mother's name was prominently displayed in one of the screenshots. I'm not sure why she would want to attend anyhow. She constantly makes things about herself and does her own thing. Giving up a real career to pretend to be a business owner? So self-centered. If nothing else, sister is leading a life of which we may be proud. My chest constricted. The subsequent screen grab was even worse. Since I didn't want her to show up and ruin the day with a dramatic story about her engagement, I honestly didn't notify her about the reunion. Who cares? She's not getting married first, after all. When the television came back to life, I sensed my fiancé looking at me. "What is it?" he inquired. "Proof," I muttered. I was still gazing at the screenshots when we arrived home. I entered my family group chat, which I had been kicked out of years ago and was only periodically added back in for important updates, and added myself back in. I wasn't sure if this was because I was angry, wounded, or incredulous. I sent the screenshots as soon as I noticed my name appeared in the chat. Just those receipts for everyone to see, nothing else. I typed, "Is this how you truly feel about me?" a few seconds later. I suppose I ought to have remained forgotten at that time. Setting my phone aside, I waited. It was not long before the responses began to pour in. First to enter, my brother said, "This was private. You're blowing things out of proportion and being dramatic as usual." My sister then asked, "What did you anticipate would happen if you shared this? For no apparent reason, you're making things worse. Give it up." Their texts appeared like fast fire as I watched them type one after the other. Before my mother's name was ultimately displayed, I gave them a minute to vent. Compared to the others, her message was longer. Those remarks were misconstrued. "I don't like you creating all this needless drama, and you're reading too much into things. You've been overly sensitive all along. Taken out of context?" I scribbled a response as I took up the phone once more. "I'm offended because this is not how any parent should discuss their child. This is your opinion of me, even though I wasn't invited to my own family's reunion?" My dad's name showed up in the chat for the first time, but he only typed a scene tag beneath my message instead of typing anything. I didn't stay to finish reading it. I threw my phone onto the couch and placed it on silent. Sitting beside me, my fiancé drew me in. However, my phone buzzed once again shortly after. One of my aunts sent me a private message saying, "I had no idea that any of this was going on. I sincerely apologize for the treatment you received. You're worthy of better." Another reply arrived a few minutes later, saying, "We're proud of you for standing up for yourself. Nobody should be able to convince you otherwise." Although it wasn't much, it gave me hope that I wasn't going insane. I wondered for a long time if I was exaggerating. As my mother used to say, I might have been overly sensitive. However, I now had evidence, and a few supporters, at the very least. My phone rang just as I was beginning to believe that the worst was past. The name of my sister appeared on the screen. I nearly didn't respond, but I did. She wasted no time at all. She remarked, "You're destroying the family dynamic. What prevented you from letting it go? Mom didn't want any conflict, therefore she didn't invite you. You have merely exacerbated the situation." I refrained from arguing. I didn't shout. "You don't let go of not being invited to your own family's reunion," I simply retorted. Then she hung up the phone. I decided I'd had enough that evening as I sat with my fiancé. I wasn't going to ask for their blessing all the time. A family who obviously didn't want me around was not someone I was going to pursue. I have to back down for my own mental health. The group chat was erased by me. My sister's number was blocked by me. And I allowed myself to give up for the first time in years. If love wasn't offered freely, I wouldn't beg for it. Update 4. My phone called out of the blue a week after the repercussions from the family group chat. I froze after taking a quick look at the screen. It was my father. For background, I didn't get many calls from my dad. Never. I was astonished to see his name appear because he mainly left family affairs to my mom. I considered leaving it on voicemail, but my curiosity won out. I took it up. He initially only made the customary awkward small talk. After a lengthy silence, he finally stated that he wanted to clarify the reunion. He spoke in a rigid, nearly practiced voice. He maintained it wasn't intended to harm me and referred to it as a miscommunication. I hadn't heard anything like an apology from him in a long time. I didn't give him a pass. I inquired as to why I hadn't been invited earlier. After struggling to find the right words, he finally said, "It wasn't intentional." I told him that didn't make sense since how can it be an accident to forget to invite your own child? I persisted, reminding him that my mother's own remarks in the group chat demonstrated differently, but he didn't respond. A second too long, the silence lingered, and then he broke. Quietly, he acknowledged, She believed it would be better that way. Your mother did not wish for any conflict. That's when I heard it. My mother's voice, followed by a slight background rustle. She must have been using the speakerphone to listen in because she abruptly interrupted the conversation. She answered abruptly, "I'm here too." As though I had called her somehow. The waterworks then began. She accused me of attacking her and making the family feel ashamed by publishing the screenshots, but her voice faltered. She claimed that I, not she, was the source of the issues. She claimed that I had made everything public only to cause her embarrassment and trouble. I didn't shout or argue. I spoke steadily and assured her that I was only seeking the truth and wasn't making any personal attacks. After hearing what was going on, my fiancé, who had been sitting close by, approached. It was enough to ground me when he placed a hand on my shoulder and muttered, "Don't let them twist this." My mother's tone altered when she saw that I wasn't going to back down. After giving a loud sniff, she continued, "You only announced your engagement at the reunion to steal your sister's spotlight," which almost made me laugh aloud. I didn't think twice. Calmly, I informed her that, like my sister, I had every right to share good news about my life. No one was in competition with me. I informed her that none of this would have occurred if I had been invited in the first place. I could tell I had touched a nerve by the quiet that ensued. She chose to play the victim, which is her favorite approach, rather than admit anything. "It might be better if you don't attend family gatherings at all if you can't forgive us and move on," she remarked forcefully. And there it was, the final command. I remained calm. I refrained from crying. I simply exhaled and answered, "If that's how you feel, then fine," before hanging up. I sat there looking at the phone in my hand for a minute. My fiancé took a seat beside me and waited silently. I told him everything that had transpired, including my mom's accusation and ultimatum, as well as my dad's hesitant apology. "They're showing you exactly who they are," he continued, nodding. I lay in bed that night and gazed up at the ceiling. I kept replaying the phone call in my head. More than that, though, I began to reflect on all the events that had preceded this. I reflected on the holidays I had spent by myself since my siblings' families came first. My parents' constant comparisons of my unstable career to my brother's corner office and sister's work at the law company. The understated appearance. The contemptuous remarks. This was where it had all been leading. As I laid there, I came to the realization that I didn't deserve this. I wasn't worthy of fighting for meager affection or acting as though nothing was wrong. My siblings would always come first, as my family had often demonstrated to me. For the first time, I made the decision to stop pursuing those who made me feel inadequate. My fiancé sat down across from me and handed me a cup of coffee the following morning. He had a solemn expression. He remarked, "I've been thinking. How about hosting our own engagement celebration? Something modest, just those who genuinely stand by us." The concept sounded odd at first. I hadn't even considered celebrating without my family because they had been my default for so long. However, it made more sense the more I about it. Why should I continue to expend my energy on indifferent people? People that loved us for who we were, not who they wanted us to be, were the ones I wanted to celebrate this milestone with. After the reunion, we had a list of friends, my fiancé's family, and a couple of cousins who had gotten in touch with me privately. They all agreed that I was deserving of better treatment. I made the decision to focus on the folks who came to me unconditionally and let go of the things I couldn't control. I kept the celebration a secret from my parents and siblings. I was tired of trying to mend something that had been damaged for years and realized that it would only lead to more turmoil at this point. I was not going to plead for their affection or acceptance for the first time in my life. I had given up trying to find a family that didn't recognize me. At last, I was making my own decision. Fifth update, everything I didn't know I needed was provided at the engagement party. Just my fiancé's family, a few of my relatives who had been there for me through all the turmoil, and close friends made it modest and private. We arranged our backyard with string lights, served a variety of takeout and homemade cuisine, and adorned the tables with flowers that my fiancé had purchased from a nearby market. EasyJet ideal. Early in the evening, people began to arrive. I hadn't experienced such genuine enthusiasm at a family gathering in years, but the atmosphere was lighthearted and full of laughs. As soon as she got there, the cousin who had sent me the screenshots gave me a hug. "You're worthy of better," she said. She didn't mention the reunion, which I appreciated. "We're proud of you." An hour later, the biggest surprise arrived. Another car drew up to the curb, and my fiancé gave me a little shove. One of my aunts was leaving when I turned around. This aunt wasn't just any aunt though, she was the only one to privately text me to apologize and say she didn't know what had been going on following the group chat controversy. She was unexpected, But there she was, smiling warmly and holding a modest wrapped gift. As she entered the yard, she added, "I hope it's okay that I came?" She gave me a hug, and for a second I was speechless. I wanted to see you both and say congratulations in person. I simply nodded and opened the door for her. It meant more to me than words could express to have her there. The folks who came through for me without reservation were more important than the statistics. Throughout the evening, my fiancé made a toast. The audience became silent as he lifted his glass. To my future wife, he remarked with a smile, "I've seen her overcome so many obstacles and still come out stronger. Her character and the life we are creating together make me really proud." As the audience applauded, someone exclaimed, "To the happy couple." People who truly wanted to join us in celebrating were all around me as I stood there with my glass. I felt like I was being seen for the first time. There was only love, no backstabbing remarks, no comparisons, and no compulsion to prove anything. We stayed around the fire pit with a few pals and ended up wrapping things late. I was not mistaken when one of my relatives remarked, laughing, "I haven't seen you this happy in years." After 2 weeks, I received an unexpected email. My dad gave it to me. Before I opened my email, I sat there looking at his name. He apologized first. It felt different this time. He acknowledged that, both during the reunion and in other instances prior to it, he had not defended me. He expressed guilt for not doing more to help me feel included and claimed he had no idea how much I had been harmed over the years. "I know I haven't spoken anything when you needed me to," he wrote. "Even though it might take some time, I hope we can begin repairing our friendship." I scrolled down after reading it twice. His addition at the bottom, "Your mom still doesn't see things the same way," caused me to pause. I'm not sure whether she will ever own up to her faults because she feels like the true victim in all of this. I also apologize for that. Although it hurt, it wasn't shocking. My mother had never taken responsibility for anything. I took some time to consider my response, and then I typed up a brief one. I praised my dad for getting in touch and let him know that while I valued his words, I value his deeds more. It would require work on all sides if he really wanted to rebuild things. I honestly didn't require a response, so I didn't anticipate one right away. I wasn't waiting for him to suddenly turn into the ideal father. His little step was plenty for now. However, I wouldn't accept compromises. I refused to put myself back in a situation where I didn't feel appreciated. Naturally, my sister couldn't help but stir things up. A few days later, I came upon one of her passive-aggressive Facebook posts. It was ambiguous but clear enough. It's funny how some people enjoy revealing personal details to get attention. Good or bad, family is family. I didn't answer. I didn't even give myself enough time to become upset about it. After blocking her, I simply went on. Her opinions, her sarcasm, and her judgment no longer had any influence over me. Life was fuller but quieter in the weeks that followed. I concentrated on running my company, organizing our wedding, and hanging out with the individuals who genuinely cared about me. I at last discovered serenity when I let go of the need to win my family's approval. In retrospect, I saw how much of my life had been wasted attempting to conform to a model that I was never meant to fit. Because I was different, my family had always made me feel inferior. However, that didn't prove me incorrect. Their incapacity to recognize my value was a reflection of them, not of me. Family is everything, as some people may say, and perhaps it is true for them. However, rather than condemnation and exclusion, family should be about love, respect, and support. I've never been happier as I'm finally creating a life with individuals that support me unconditionally. So here I am, going forth guilt-free and regret-free. I have no idea what the future holds for my parents or siblings, but I do know that I will never longer accept anything less than what I am worthy of. And to be honest, it feels really nice. I was caught in a mistake, and my colleague took advantage of the situation to sabotage my interests. Am I the asshole for deciding to report it to the police? I've, 29 degrees Fahrenheit, officially had it, and I'm commencing a campaign of, relatively benign, psychological warfare against one of my coworkers. I'll call him Dan. Dan started at the company on November 23rd and seemed cool at first, but I have slowly grown to find him very annoying. There are too many examples to get into, but I would describe him as an entitled, impertinent sourpuss with a nicotine addiction and a self-professed problem with following the rules. WTF, why would you brag about this at work? He is my same age and role. FTR, I also arguably have a nicotine addiction, but I don't make it obvious in my fucking place of work. So, a few days ago I regrettably had a horrifying emergency on my way into work. The whole ordeal unfolded very quickly, and while I was unmuted on a work call with my whole team, I don't want to go into details of the emergency, but it involved me getting caught up in an altercation that had nothing to do with me but resulted in me having a very public panic attack that my entire work team also heard over the phone. I am diagnosed with panic disorder. Edit. I am not supposed to discuss the details of this situation, as it is an open case with local law enforcement. On my way to work, I was arrested, and I was held in jail for 36 hours. I had a panic attack while being arrested, and then 5 more while I was in jail because I was denied access to my prescribed medications. You can pass your judgment on whether I deserved it, but you don't fucking know me. My other coworkers, my family, my friends, and the larger local community, not the cops, have been extremely supportive. Think what you want, but fuck the police, and I will probably never be able to trust them again. I was indisposed for a couple of days after the emergency, and once I was able to return, my work computer was still in my office building, which I ultimately never reached, so I couldn't do any actual work beyond sending emails, little messages off my phone. Almost all of my coworkers, who I've worked with for about 7 years now at this company, were incredibly supportive, sent me kind messages, and were generally concerned for my well-being, having directly heard me go through this ordeal in real time, and I still feel mortified, so their support really means the world. A few coworkers even contacted every single person I had scheduled meetings with to let them know I had an emergency. They seamlessly picked up my critical work tasks, and offered to drop off my computer at home for me. I mean, these people rock, and that's why I've been at the company for 7 years. Dan, however, has appeared to have seized upon this opportunity, my traumatic emergency, to highlight my shortcomings. In the immediate aftermath of the emergency, when my coworkers were exchanging messages of support and concern about me, Dan sent no such messages, and he didn't ask how he could support. Instead, he inserted an absolutely useless recommendation into the team group chat about how I could have avoided this emergency in the first place. He immediately tried to turn my trauma into a learning moment, as if it was so obvious that this would have happened to me because of the choices I made leading up to it. She was asking for it in that dress, if you ask me. Gross. Then, I am finally recuperated enough to look at my phone a couple days after the emergency. I get a message from a PM that I work with, asking me about the status of a report that I had put Dan in charge of. The PM tells me that they spoke with Dan yesterday, and that Dan said the report was in my court. But interestingly enough, Dan conveniently failed to mention to the PM during that conversation that I had suffered a major emergency, that Dan had witnessed just the day before, that I was presently indisposed, and that I would likely need some time to recover. Not to mention, Dan had never communicated to me prior to the emergency that the report was ready for me to review. He kept saying he had one more task to complete, so fuck him. Despite the chaos and trauma of that terrible event, I feel a renewed sense of gratitude for my life, my freedom, and the everyday privilege of being alive and surrounded by a supportive community. And I feel even more protective of it now. Things can change in an instant in ways that you couldn't possibly imagine. I truly do not have any more time for bullshit. And for this reason, I feel absolutely justified in canceling Dan from my life. I'm not gonna try to get him fired or anything like that, but I refuse to spend my days in close proximity to him at the office. We currently sit right next to each other in a 2-desk office space, but there are other desks in an adjacent office space that I can use, so I plan to move my desk away from his. He can say goodbye to any and all opportunities to support me on my projects. I no longer trust him to be a reliable and respectful team player. And most importantly, if he decides to confront me, which he might because he's actually alarmingly confrontational, I will calmly explain to him that I find his professionalism and working style to be unaligned with what I'm looking for in my projects and in my career. He'll have to find someone else to work with. Good luck, you piece of shit. Comments. Comment. Fuck it, sink him. Communicate to the PM his messages about one more task to complete and express your surprise that he didn't mention this when the PM asked him about it, especially with his awareness that you would be unavailable for several days, then disengage from him in the workplace. Oopie. This is precisely the plan. Thank you for your support. Comment. Crucify him the first chance you get. Throw him under the bus every chance you have. Shine a light on his mistakes, failures, shortcomings, and make him look as bad as he tried to make you look. Good luck, and I hope you're doing better now. Oop. Absolutely diabolical. I love it. Thank you, I am feeling much better. A few more tough days ahead, I'm afraid, but I'm taking it day by day. Comment. You are an inspiration. I am sending grandma hugs your way. Ope. Aw. Thank you so much. Comment. You're very welcome. I'm so sorry you had to go through such a traumatic event. And honestly, as a mother of 3 daughters, I am so incredibly impressed with how you are handling all this. Well done. OP. OMG, I'm the oldest of 3 daughters. I was almost like, wait, mom? LOL. My mom isn't a grandma quite yet, soon though. Comment. LOL. I'm actually not a grandma either. My daughters are more than old enough, but I have 2 of them that are like no way at all. And my oldest is like maybe in the next couple of years. So I always say I'll send your grandma hugs because I'm old enough to be one. But I honestly could care less if I ever become. Not because it makes me feel old or anything. But I absolutely don't want my kids to think somehow my life revolves around them or what they do with their lives or me being a grandma. If they want kids, I want them to have them. If they don't, I couldn't care less. Which I must admit seems so shocking to ladies my age. Because when I tell them this, they look at me like, how can you say that? I just have a great time with my daughters. I think they are funny and smart and intelligent. They are amazing people in their own right. I just love spending time with them. Oop. You sound just like my mom. Thanks for your words of encouragement. OOP clarifies what got her arrested. It definitely wasn't an accident. But I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was profiled as someone the police wanted to target and they targeted me without bothering to check themselves. Having spent 36 hours in jail talking with multiple other women, you would be surprised at how many people are there without having any idea why, and it's not 'cause they're on drugs. Since you asked, I was trying to help someone and was mistakenly, and forcibly, arrested by police while they were raiding a protest that I was not taking part in. The protest was right outside my office building, which I was trying to get to. I was thrown in jail for 36 hours, which is why I was indisposed. I wasn't given access to my prescribed medication, and in addition to the panic attack I suffered during the arrest, I had about 5 more over the next 12 hours, all while being totally ignored and laughed at by officers who are supposed to keep me safe. By the time I got out of jail, I was a zombie and I couldn't even spell my own name. Also, my job does involve manual labor. I work on construction sites, install wells, and perform sampling. I'm trained to operate man lifts, nuclear density gauges, and handle hazardous substances. Man, y'all are just... wow. Update. 2 months later, felt like posting an update. See original post. All my charges, 4 misdemeanors for resisting arrest, were dismissed because the police arrested me unlawfully. I am also moving forward with civil litigation against the police department. I thought about just dropping it and moving on with my life, but then I saw the police body cam footage and it is disturbing to say the least. Worse than I even remembered. It brought my partner and father to tears. They are not criers. My mother was simply hysterical and couldn't even get through the first few minutes. She said watching her child be held down and beaten while I was crying and screaming for help was entirely too much for her to bear. I'm shaking again, even recounting it now. Dan still works at my company, but we don't work together on anything anymore. I heard he got put on a PIP, but no one really confirmed that me, which is probably the appropriate course of action. I just stay out completely of his business. I'm doing great at work. I've always felt good about my job performance. BC, as I mentioned in the original post, I love my coworkers and my work really matters to me. I also stopped drinking, smoking, and am currently 10 days sober, which has been amazing for my productivity and my mental health. Still addicted to nicotine, damn zins, but that's the next thing to go. Taking it one step at a time. Thanks to all the kind internet strangers for your support. Apparently my story will soon be made public to the media, but hopefully you don't hear about it because the video is still mortifying for me, even though I clearly did nothing wrong, other than panic, which isn't really wrong, given the circumstances. Plus then my identity will be exposed and I'll have to make a new Reddit account. Hope Dan doesn't have Reddit and finds this, but at this point he knows what I think about him. Hi, Dan. Comments. Reasonable star 959. It will all work out. You have a good attitude, despite the awful ordeal you experienced. If it happens to be made public, the people who care about you are who matter. Great for you for quitting drinking and smoking. That's amazing. Keep on going one step at a time, one day at a time. Take care, we're pulling for you. When my husband had lupus, my parents abandoned me during pregnancy. They returned years later wanting to be grandparents but never apologized. When my husband was diagnosed with lupus, my parents left me during my pregnancy, saying that he and my unborn child weren't part of their family. They arrived 3 years later and expressed a desire to become grandparents. I severed my relationship with my parents 3 years ago after it became evident to them that my sister was more significant to them than my husband, me, or even their grandson. For background, after nearly a year of symptoms, my spouse was diagnosed with lupus during my second trimester. After multiple testing and hospital stays, we received this diagnosis, and it was a very trying period for us. The news that we were having a baby made us even more anxious. I anticipated my family to help us through this, of course. When I told my parents, they promised to do everything in their power to support me during my pregnancy and after the baby was delivered. Despite our tense prior history, I believed we were becoming closer since my sister moved away after her marriage 7 years ago, thus their pledge meant a lot to me. During her time here, my parents always emphasized her as the golden child. After she moved away and got preoccupied with her life, I believed I had a chance to connect with my parents at last. I was mistaken. I was only viewed by them as a stand-in for their favorite daughter. When my sister came home 2 months after my baby was born and announced her divorce due to her husband's infidelity, this became evident. My parents spent all of their time with her right away, forgetting about me and my relatives. I was heartbroken. Knowing that my husband and I were still adjusting to his diagnosis and frequent doctor's appointments, they had pledged to help with the baby. Because of his illness, which left him exhausted most of the time, I wasn't always able to rely on my spouse at home. Even yet, I was angry with my parents and never blamed him. My parents once became irate and told me that my sister was more significant to them than I was, particularly if I were to compare her to my own family. They claimed that although my sister was their family, my husband and son were neither. I quickly ended the call, blocked them, and never spoke to them again because that sentence was so extremely upsetting. Despite the passage of 3 years, I still can't get it out of my head. I've kept them out of my life ever then, and I want to continue doing so. Fortunately, my in-laws stepped up and provided us with excellent care. They would visit every other day to help with the baby and everything else because they knew my husband was struggling, even during my pregnancy. Even though we got along quite fine without my parents' assistance, it still hurt a lot that they didn't even think of my husband and son, especially their grandson, as members of their family. We have now moved on after 3 years. We can afford to hire a full-time nurse, and last year my husband's web development company took off. We now operate our business from home together after I resigned my job to work with him. It is a practical arrangement. My parents unexpectedly arrived with a slew of gifts a few days after we celebrated our son's 3rd birthday. Since we hadn't spoken for 3 years, they hadn't tried to get in touch, so I was shocked to see them. They didn't even recognize our earlier talk when they got there. They pretended that they had come to meet their grandson and wanted the opportunity to become grandparents, rather than offering an apology. I laughed, closed the door, and refused to interact since their actions were so absurd. After what they said the last time we spoke, I was not going to allow them to meet my son. Their statement that my husband and son were neither their family nor their responsibilities is still fresh in my mind. I wanted them to follow it now. They were agitated and would not go, making noise and pleading with me to open the door in order to clear the air, but I had no interest in doing so. Until they eventually left, I acted as though I couldn't hear them. Despite hearing the entire exchange, my husband and in-laws remained silent until I had composed myself. They talked to me about 30 minutes later and advised me to talk to my parents again, even though I didn't want to give them an opportunity to meet my son just yet. My spouse and his parents feel that I should at least listen to them and consider it calmly. They contend that I would regret not giving my parents an opportunity to explain themselves because they still made the effort to show their, even though it has been 3 years. At least I'll feel good about giving them an opportunity, even if it doesn't work out, and they were the ones who blew it. I followed my instructions. I truly appreciate that my spouse and in-laws were not forcing their opinions on me. I know that their counsel was given out of care. But I simply don't want to speak with my folks. I don't think I need that type of drama in my life right now, and I don't feel ready. I've always had a tense relationship with my parents, and following that most recent argument, I made the decision that I wouldn't talk to them unless they truly apologized. That still hasn't occurred. They didn't offer an apology when they recently appeared. Even if they later apologize, I'll need some time to determine whether their sincerity or desire to maintain a relationship with their grandchild is the reason. I believe I've earned the right to forgive them, so I won't be doing it right away. My sister has always been their top priority, and they have never treated me well. However, I acknowledge that I might regret not providing my parents an opportunity to clarify their position and make amends, as my husband and in-laws have pointed out. I'm unsure of what to do and am bewildered. After 3 years of no communication, am I mistaken for not wishing to speak with my parents? Update: I've given it some thought and read over all of the comments. I really appreciate your advice. I've come to the conclusion that I'm not yet ready to speak with my parents. Their actions have still caused me much emotional pain. They still haven't apologized, and I had decided not to talk to them until they did. They had the opportunity to apologize when they arrived the other day, but they chose not to. After I shut them out, they attempted to speak to me through the door, claiming that we could resolve the matter. They never said the one thing they were expected to say. They were sorry. It's okay. I've gone 3 years without speaking to anyone, and I can do the same for the next 3. My husband and his family and I have spoken about this, and we don't have any animosity. This choice isn't causing us any conflict. They knew how distressed I was when my parents contacted me, so they were only offering me advice out of concern. They don't argue or put any pressure on you. Since several comments seem to cast doubt on their motives, I just wanted to make that clear. The support from my husband and in-laws is tremendous. Even if it were for the benefit of my family, they would never make me do something I wasn't prepared for. My parents were quite kind when I told them how I felt and that I wasn't ready to talk to them. They assured me that they would respect my choice and not put any pressure on me, even if I didn't feel ready at any time thereafter. They made it clear that they would totally support me in making the greatest decision for myself since they trusted me to do so. Although I appreciate their understanding, I simply don't feel prepared to speak with my parents at this time. Right now, I don't want that kind of turmoil in my life. My parents haven't tried to get in touch with me since their visit, which was nearly a week ago. I'm not sure why they made the abrupt attempt to get in touch after 3 years, but I have a feeling they might try again. It's okay if they don't. If they do, they must first apologize before I will engage them. Second update. My sister contacted me earlier this week. She messaged me on Instagram to ask if we could have lunch because she was in the area and I hadn't blocked her. Despite our lack of animosity, my sister and I have never been particularly close. Although we had disagreements when we were teenagers, things have been peaceful ever since. I was hesitant to meet her at first, but I accepted her message because it seemed genuine. We haven't communicated much during the last 3 years, usually simply sharing birthday and holiday greetings. In spite of my suspicion that she would eventually bring up our parents, meeting her wasn't as awkward as I had anticipated. We struck up a conversation. She stated that she has been residing close by ever since her divorce was finalized 2 years ago. She acknowledged that she had been too busy to schedule a meeting with me earlier. We both knew that was untrue, we had just not given each other priority. However, I accepted her excuse because it would have been embarrassing to admit that straight. She told me that after spending her first year back with our parents, she moved to a suburban home and now resides with her partner. She also disclosed that, although she hasn't made the announcement yet, she recently got engaged. I really congratulated her and expressed my happiness for her. I was happy to see her moving on with her life because I knew how deeply her ex-husband's infidelity had wounded her. She eventually brought up our parents after meeting up. Things took an unexpected turn at this point. Since she has always gotten along with them and they have always put her first, I expected her to stand up for them. Although it wasn't her fault, she never seemed to bother. Instead, she informed me that she is currently at odds with them. She acknowledged that she wanted to talk to me about a few things and to express her regret for the past. I was surprised since I didn't think she needed to apologize because our parents, not her, were the source of my problems. But she clarified that her recent altercation with them had caused her to consider what she had done. Even though she knew our parents preferred her, she felt bad about how she had treated me in the past and for never challenging them. She regretted not doing more to address the dynamic, which she was aware of. I urged her not to be ridiculous, but she wanted to apologize for never defending me. What could she have done, really? Our parents, not her, were the issue. She acknowledged that she let things proceed the way our parents desired, but she stated she should have stood up for me. Although I truly appreciated her addressing it, I informed her that I didn't blame her and that she didn't need to feel sorry. She then began to explain to me why she and our parents were currently at odds. She got engaged to her boyfriend, which apparently upset them because they thought it was too soon after her divorce. They were concerned about what people might think and felt that it was inappropriate to think of getting married again so soon. But my sister didn't give a damn about such views. She clarified that she had lost interest in her ex-husband even prior to her divorce. Before she found out about his affair, they had been dragging their marriage along for more than a year. Their relationship had ended a long time ago, and she believed that our parents were being self-centered by expecting her to put off moving on because they were afraid of rumors. Since it's common to move on after a broken marriage, I don't think anyone would find this circumstance intriguing enough to engage in gossip. Her timing is perfectly acceptable. She was also arguing with them about having kids, as if that wasn't awful enough. She is an independent woman who does not owe our parents grandchildren, therefore I found it incomprehensible that she was still answerable to them for her own choices. In spite of this, our parents were fighting about her decision to forgo having children. Our mom tried to persuade our dad that at least her plan to remarry meant she would have children soon, while they were discussing whether it was right for her to get engaged so quickly. She even mentioned my sister's biological clock, saying it was time for her to consider starting a family. My sister had to explain, of course, that she had no intention of having children, not now, Not ever. She planned to live a completely childless life. Our parents were even more horrified by this discovery. Her decision to stay childless simply served to exacerbate their already irritated feelings about her hasty engagement. They haven't spoken to each other since this argument got out of hand and caused a significant fallout. My sister broke down at the restaurant while she was telling me this. It was obvious that she wasn't managing the issue effectively. I did everything in my power to console her. Since she had dedicated her entire life to avoiding failing our parents, I could see how difficult it must be for her. She actually said that even when she started experiencing problems in her first marriage, she continued to be in the poisonous relationship because our parents didn't believe that divorce was the answer. Clearly, that marriage had not ended well. Before his affair ended the marriage, her ex-husband had been poisonous, and they had fought nearly every day. My sister made the decision to go her own way this time, even if it meant disappointing our parents. Even though she genuinely loved them and didn't want to lose them, she informed me that she couldn't keep living her life according to their wishes, particularly when it came to important choices like marriage and having kids. Our parents had attempted to persuade her that having a kid would resolve all of their marital issues in her prior marriage. She claimed that because her ex-husband was so toxic, having a kid with him would have simply made matters worse, thus she had escaped a bullet. She told me that she had never wanted children in the first place and that she had made a lot of choices just to appease our parents. For instance, rather than following her own interests, she chose to study business in college because it was what they desired. Our parents had controlled every aspect of her life, and now she simply desired to live her life as she saw fit. I felt terrible for her as she broke down and started crying as I tried to console her. After years of stress and hardship, this mature woman was finally crumbling. I came to see how foolish it had been of me to believe that her life was ideal. Our parents put a lot of pressure on her, and she had been fighting to survive all the time. That same pressure has also caused a rift between us along the way. I made the decision to stop it. We had already squandered too much time acting as though we were unrelated to one another. In actuality, we were sisters, and our parents had destroyed our bond. I refused to allow them to continue to rule our lives. I assured my sister that she could now confide in me about anything. After so many years of avoiding me, I was happy that she had decided to speak with me. I informed her that she didn't need to allow our parents to make her feel bad, because she wasn't doing anything wrong. I encouraged her, telling her she didn't need our parents' approval anymore, and gave her a pep talk. Following their wishes hadn't exactly worked out for her in the past, as evidenced by her first marriage, and she was mature enough to make her own decisions. Even while I couldn't promise that her new marriage would work out, I assured her that if it did, at least she would be responsible for it and not have to hold anyone else accountable. I also mentioned that our parents had come to see me recently in an effort to patch things up. They obviously didn't come to truly apologize or mend our relationship. They were attempting to take advantage of their second chance with my family after realizing they wouldn't have grandchildren from my sister. This insight made my blood boil. I won't allow them to treat my son like a placeholder because he is not. My sister looked scared when I told her about our parents' visit. The timing was simply too shady. They arrived at my home attempting to infiltrate my son's life when they abruptly discovered that their favorite daughter would not be bearing them grandchildren anytime soon. My sister concurred that it was suspicious and assured me that I had made the right decision in refusing to let them in or extend forgiveness. Even if I had been thinking about forgiving them if they apologized after this, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm glad I chose to have lunch with my sister that day to work things out. Despite my initial skepticism, I'm actually happy I accepted the lunch at all. I discovered many things I should have known, but most all, I came to the conclusion that my sister's life was not as idyllic as I had always thought. For me, this changed everything. My in-laws are aware of what I said to my sister, and I have discussed everything with my husband. Since it's obvious that my parents weren't here with the best of intentions, they are adamantly opposed to me making amends with them now. Their hidden agendas were repulsive. My sister and I have stayed in contact ever since. Despite her initial wish for reconciliation, she has made the decision to completely cut off contact with our parents. She acknowledged they didn't deserve it after talking to me. They not only mistreated me, but they also put a lot of pressure on her for years. She informed me that she didn't even know who she truly was for a long time because she had spent so much of her life trying to please them. It may sound cheesy, but for her, that's the real deal. She's had enough now though, and I'm happy that she's standing up for herself. We both need our parents to keep their distance and let us live our lives as we see fit. They've caused enough harm. Third update. My sister and I have been corresponding daily for the past 5 weeks since our lunch date. Sincerely, we both needed this but were unaware of it until now, so I'm extremely happy that we're getting back in touch. We were both made aware of how horribly our parents treated us by that lunch talk. Our parents made another attempt to get in touch with us last week. Since we've blocked them everywhere else, they sent us an email. Even still, their tone was patronizing, as though they were reaching out to us as a favor. We responded that we didn't need that and asked them to avoid us before blocking them once more. We both spent a lot of time attempting to gain their favor, but it's obvious now that we can't win with them. We no longer want to be good daughters to them because they weren't good parents to either of us. We cut them off entirely after sending them our last response. They haven't made another attempt to get in touch since. I hope they leave us alone at last. That negativity is not what I want in my life. They are awful people in addition to being bad parents. I'm glad I stopped seeing them years ago. Because she was so devoted to them, it has been more difficult for my sister. In all honesty, though, it seems more like Stockholm Syndrome. I'm here to support her while she deals with it now. We've become much closer, and I'm even helping to organize her wedding. It says a lot. All I can hope for is that everything goes smoothly and that our parents stay out of it. Fourth update. Last week my sister got married. I had a great time serving as a bridesmaid. They kept it quiet and small. I don't see why my parents couldn't get along with her husband. He seems like a wonderful man. My sister seemed to be truly content in this relationship, therefore it's their loss. They were obviously very happy at the wedding. It's really pitiful that our parents were unable to approve of this because they were worried about what unimportant people would think. My sister and I are clearly getting along well these days. We're actually quite close friends, I'd say. Our parents haven't contacted us in a while. They informed us via email approximately 5 months ago that they were giving everything to charity and that we shouldn't expect an inheritance because we are ungrateful brats. I'm not sure why they felt the need to inform us of that or what they anticipated would occur next. They must be disappointed that we didn't go pleading for their pardon, but it doesn't matter to anyone. I'm content with my life, my son, my spouse, and my in-laws, who are far superior to my parents. My sister is content with her spouse as well. Our parents are free to remain alone and stew in their resentment and hatred. It's really their loss. Am I the asshole for excluding my cheating husband from the delivery room and naming our baby without him? This is a throwaway account because I'm so annoyed and need to vent. This will be a lot, so I'm sorry in advance. I, 28F, had been together with my husband, 27M, for nearly 10 years. We got married at 21, had our first son a year after, followed by our daughter 3 years later. I built my whole life around my family. We got good jobs. He worked full-time, I worked from home, we had a good home in a great neighborhood, and we put our children in good schools. We also had a successful business on the side. I thought we did everything right. My best friend, since we were in middle school, lived close. We had our daughters around the same time, and we'd have playdates all the time. We leaned on each other a lot. I gave her all the support when she was going through issues with her daughter's deadbeat father and got her in contact with a good lawyer. I leaned on her when I was recovering from my traumatic second birth and the depression that followed. We leaned on each other for everything. 10 months ago, I found out I was pregnant for the third time. I was really uneasy about this because of my traumatic experience the second time. Also, my husband and I both agreed we were done after our 2 children. I considered abortion, but my husband insisted we keep it. I was still uneasy about the pregnancy and borderline miserable for the next 6 months. I was diagnosed with hyperemesis gravidarum and was throwing up 20 times a day for 6 months straight. I lost a ton of weight, had to stop working, and was sent to the hospital frequently due to severe dehydration. My husband stood by me and showered me with attention, for which I was so grateful. He cut down his hours at work to look after me, the house, and the kids. My best friend would come to our home frequently to check on me and also help with the house. When I hit 6 months, the hyperemesis gravidarum decreased a lot, and I was almost back to myself. One night after having a movie night with my family, my husband and I were getting ready to sleep. He fell asleep right away while I quickly checked on the kids before getting into bed. His phone was vibrating like crazy, so out of genuine curiosity, I unlocked his phone. We used to do this a lot when we were younger, so I didn't think too much of it. I was already sitting in bed. I saw messages from my friend. They were frantic spam messages. One of them said, "Please come over, I need you." Another said, "I know I shouldn't be messaging here, but I miss you. And come over when she's asleep." I think I was there in a daze for nearly 5 minutes. I cried a lot quietly, and the fatigue kind of left me. I scoured his phone looking for more. I saw emails and DMs from them both, even using apps like Kik to message, and the pictures. But the worst part was finding out my husband left me one time in the hospital with my mother while he went back home, where my kids were being babysat by my friend, and got intimate in our bedroom, with our kids in the house. I kicked him out the following morning after confronting him and filed for separation sometime after. For the next 2 months, he had been begging for forgiveness, then complaining and insulting me that I'm not letting him see his kids, or that I'm stopping him from going with me to doctor appointments, which I had been. We had planned months earlier about who was going to be in the labor room. It was going to be my mother and husband. He called me when I was 35 weeks, questioning the labor situation. At this point, he had moved in with my ex-friend's house shortly before this call. I said no, and he got very angry. Lots of my in-laws and family members told me to put our differences aside for our baby. I still said no. I gave birth to my son with my mother and sister present and didn't feel any regret about my choice. After my second traumatic birth, I just wanted to make sure this one was as stable as possible, which it was. We were going to name our child after his father who passed away. I went along with it to make him happy but changed my mind and picked a name I had always loved since childhood. This aggravated him even more. AITA? Because I'm being guilt-tripped by many people right now. All I want is for everyone to leave me alone and for me to just be with my kids. Edit. Just wanted to add that I do let him see the kids. That would be crazy if I didn't. My children love their dad. I just have certain boundaries now that we aren't together, and he doesn't respect them. He gets angry and says things that are categorically not true. He got to meet our newborn son hours after I gave birth. Update. So, I'm back after nearly a whole year. I completely forgot about this post because I've been so wrapped up in other things. For anyone who doesn't want to read the whole post, here's a summary. My husband had been cheating on me with my best friend while I was pregnant. I was close to giving birth and decided not to have my then husband in the labor room with me. I also chose a name for our baby that he didn't agree with. Like I said, it's basically been a whole year. My baby turned 1 today, and after celebrating his birthday and Christmas with my kids, it finally hit me that this is my new reality. First of all, my ex-husband and I finally went through with the divorce proceedings. I had been holding it off during my pregnancy and early postpartum period to avoid added stress and to carefully plan for my children and myself. I was awarded primary physical custody of our children. Their dad visits once a week, and the 2 older kids, 7 and 4, spend every other weekend with him. My youngest will start doing the same in a couple of months, which makes me nervous. He's especially clingy with me, all my kids are, but my youngest has really only known me as the most present parent. One of the main stipulations in our custody agreement is that my ex's affair partner is prohibited from seeing the kids. My poor kids have been confused enough by their parents' sudden split, and I didn't want them even more confused by seeing their aunt, who is supposed to be mommy's best friend, with their dad. It was deemed emotionally detrimental in court. As for the baby name, he's been so bitter about it, I think he's still mad about it. His side has been trying to convince me to change the name to something we'd both like, especially after the divorce was finalized. But it's been a year now, and the baby quite literally answers by the name I gave him, so I'm not going to be changing it. He was also unhappy with the child support payments, among other payments, and asked for some revisions. One main thing he asked to change was the cost of our kids' school tuition. He pays for their tuition, which he felt was too much and too harsh. But the court stuck with the original payments. As for my ex-husband and ex-best friend, they continued dating. I found out that they had started seeing each other a month into my 3rd pregnancy. They had actually slept together during my 2nd pregnancy but didn't pursue a relationship then because, as they put it, they weren't ready to ruin things and didn't want to hurt anybody. My ex's side have been very supportive of their relationship, even inviting her to holiday gatherings like Thanksgivings or family holidays. Because of this, my kids don't go very often to these events. I don't know, after this whole fiasco I'm coming to the realization that perhaps my ex's side never really liked me all that much. But that's okay. I eventually spoke with my ex-best friend to ask why they did it. She claimed that they were just friends but grew close while she was dealing with issues involving her deadbeat ex-boyfriend. Both of them insisted that my ex-husband just wanted to protect her, which supposedly turned into love. Hearing this hurt me a lot, but at the same time, I felt relieved to know the truth. When I sat with this information for a while, it stopped hurting. It made me realize that I didn't still love my ex-husband and could finally let go of him and their betrayal. They broke up a week ago. Apparently, it's just a break, though who knows. Although my kids go to their dad's house every other weekend, it has helped a lot with making time for myself. Obviously, I'm figuring out who I am without being a wife or mom all the time. In many ways, I find what happened to be a true blessing, which is why I'm no longer angry. As for me, I've been seeing someone. It hasn't been very long, but we get along great. Initially, my ex-husband made the whole situation difficult. He didn't want me to have any man, specifically, around the kids. Edit. I don't know how to update posts, so my apologies if it's wrong. I grew up in indifference, loved by my grandparents. Despite neglect and being used, I forgave my parents in their old age. I was a surprise and an afterthought for parents in their 40s with a daughter who was 10 years old. My mother used to say, "We didn't plan for you," as if she were monitoring the weather. The message was plain, but she would not say the rest. I was only here because my grandparents convinced my reluctant parents to have another child. My sister Jessica was already engrossed in her adolescent world when I got there. She acted indifferently, not viciously, like if I didn't exist. I would play with my dolls in the corner of our shared living room while she was on the phone, splayed out on the sofa, discussing college applications and boys. Mom would urge Jessica not to forget anything as she carefully placed her SAT preparation materials in her backpack. In the meantime, I would wait at the kitchen table in the hopes that someone would assist me with my schoolwork, but assistance was infrequent. Rather, a pattern set by my parents influenced my life. Every morning, they dropped me off at my grandparents' place. My grandparents' house became my real home when my father would jingle his keys and tell my grandfather, "You wanted her, she's all yours." They made sure I was fed and taken care of, picked me up from school, helped me with my homework, and took me to the park. My parents would show up late at night, looking exhausted and a little annoyed at the trouble of having to come get me. "Ashley, you're the best thing that ever happened to us," my grandma would remark as she gave me a final hug each night. I could almost forget that I wasn't loved at home in her warm embrace. This pattern persisted year after year and day after day. In my parents' home, I learned to live as an afterthought while my sister got ready for her promising future. My grandparents' devotion, however, never wavered. One day you'll understand that sometimes the best things in life aren't planned. My grandfather would wink at me as we worked on arithmetic problems, and for a minute, the weight of being unloved was lifted off my little shoulders. I hoped that would change when Jessica left for college. As the daughter who stayed, perhaps my parents would finally see me. I was completely mistaken. My mother's voice rang out to me as soon as I entered the house after school. "Ashley, the house has to be cleaned. Begin with the restrooms." I took over all of the tasks that Jessica had previously handled, in addition to a number of other duties. I got to know the washing machine's settings by heart and it became my daily companion. The housework seemed to go on forever. Every time I hesitated, my father would remark, "You have to help, you live here? Your sister always took the brunt of it." The changes at home weren't even gradual by the time I was 14. After work, they expected dinner to be ready, so I made spaghetti that night, but my mother abruptly stopped preparing it, saying, "You're old enough now." It was good, albeit a little overcooked. My parents ate in silence until my father stated, "Tomorrow, try something with chicken," without raising his head, in a tone that made it obvious this was not a recommendation. My escape was to dream about college. Every night after finishing my homework and chores, I would go to my room and go to university websites, visualizing myself strolling around campus, unencumbered by the never-ending responsibilities at home. One Sunday afternoon when I was 16, Jessica came home with news that changed everything. A tall, well-dressed man followed her as she entered. She exclaimed, "Mom, Dad. This is Michael. We're engaged," as if someone had declared a lottery victory. My parents leaped from their seats, and my mother wept with delight. My mother, embracing Jessica, exclaimed, "We'll pay for everything. It has to be flawless for our first daughter's wedding." My father immediately began phoning family members. The house was bustling with wedding preparations for months. Discussions centered on guest lists, venues, and flowers. Designer clothing and upscale shops were commonplace. Despite being present at the wedding, my grandparents were uncomfortable with the extravagant decor. While my grandfather nodded solemnly at the champagne fountain, my grandma scowled at the ice sculpture, which was probably worth more than a semester's worth of college tuition. They didn't share their thoughts. 3 college admission letters surrounded me as I sat at the dinner table 2 years later. Every one of my top options had accepted me. It had paid off after years of playing Cinderella and getting straight A's. I told my folks the news with a fluttering heart. "That's nice," my mother said, not even raising her head from her dinner. "But we spent all our savings on your sister's wedding. Even took out a loan." "There's nothing left for college," I muttered. "But you still paid for Jessica's college." "That was different," said my mom. "We considered her to have a promise." At the table, the silence grew intolerable. My parents were still eating, unconcerned that they had just dashed my hopes, and my admission letters felt heavier in my hands. In between nibbles, my father added, "You should find a job. Save some money. That's what responsible adults do." Take out a student loan. I walked away from the table without requesting an excuse, tears running down my cheeks. I contacted my grandmother, who lived nearby, trembling. I was at their door in a matter of minutes, sobbing in her consoling arms as I told them everything. My granddad listened carefully, his face hardening. But I couldn't quite pinpoint something in his eyes. When I was done, my grandfather's voice was forceful. "Ashley, we've been expecting this," I said. "What do you mean?" My grandma softly said. "We've seen how they treated you over the years. How they spent on Jessica's education, her wedding. We knew they might do this to you." After disappearing into his study, my grandfather came back carrying a folder. He said, "We've been saving for your education since the day you were born." And he opened it to show bank documents. "You are covered. You can choose any of those 3 colleges." That night, I returned home and began packing only the things I would need, not everything. My parents barely looked away from the television when I told them I was moving in with my grandparents. "Whatever you think is best," my mother murmured, her eyes never leaving the screen, and I sensed relief in her voice. The weeks that followed were spent getting ready for college. Motivated by my parents' inadequate money management, I decided to get a degree in financial analysis in order to learn how to do things correctly. My grandparents assisted me with every aspect, from purchasing supplies to completing paperwork. It was like entering a whole new world when courses began that fall. Even though the schoolwork was difficult, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Every lecture felt like a stride toward a brighter future and a step away from my past. I was so excited that my lecturers noticed me. Before long, I was staying after class to talk about difficult financial ideas. Someone other than my grandparents saw potential in me for the first time in my life. My grandmother contacted me during my sophomore year of college to share some shocking Jessica news. During one of our weekly calls, she mentioned that her sister was experiencing difficulties. "Michael is unable to maintain a job, and her marketing career isn't progressing as expected. They are constantly requesting money from your parents." The fact that my parents were providing them with money didn't surprise me. With a sigh, my grandmother said, "Your mother spent all of her retirement money last month to pay their rent. They just can't refuse her." The situation deteriorated a year later. Despite my parents' financial assistance, Jessica and Michael were unable to pay their rent and returned to my former bedroom, which I had maintained immaculate for years. I didn't miss the irony. In the meantime, I was doing well. I was given internships at prominent financial firms by my teachers, where I was able to hone my innate ability to solve challenging financial challenges. My confidence increased with each project. "You have a natural sense for this," my boss said to me during a Morgan Stanley performance assessment. "We hope to see you again in the summer." I ignored my grandparents' sporadic calls since I was too preoccupied with my education and future plans. But I knew right away that something wasn't right when I went to see them in my senior year. My grandmother's bright smile was forced, and my grandfather, who is normally happy, sat quietly in his recliner. Unspoken comments weighed heavily on the house. I inquired over dinner. "What's wrong?" I urged. "Don't tell me it's nothing," as they pushed food around their plates. "I am too familiar with you both." They looked at each other in a way that I had seen a lot before, which indicated that they were attempting to shield me from terrible news. My grandfather finally said something. "Last week, your parents visited us," he remarked in a tired tone. "They requested their share of the inheritance." "What are you saying?" I dropped my fork and asked. My grandmother clarified that they were having issues with the banks. Numerous credit card debts and loans. They claimed that in order to stay out of bankruptcy, they needed $200,000. I was so angry that I couldn't control myself. "You also handed it to them?" My grandfather gave a nod. "Ashley, we had to. They are still our daughter and son-in-law despite everything," he remarked. "It was most of our savings," my grandmother said quietly. "The majority of your funds?" I let out a yell. "After their actions? How did they allow Jessica's careless actions to continue? After the way they handled me?" Across the table, my grandmother reached out and took my hands. "We understand your rage, sweetie, but what's done is done. We'll be all right." I wasn't feeling it though. I was furious. After treating me like a servant and never having the funds for my education, my parents now had the gall to demand money from the only people who had ever shown me genuine concern. After I graduated, my efforts were rewarded. I was employed by one of the best financial firms in the area thanks to my excellent internship experiences and the excellent recommendations from my teachers. The initial pay was more than I could have ever imagined. I had a tremendous sense of independence when I discovered a tiny, tidy, and safe one-bedroom apartment. Knowing I had no one else to cook for, I awoke each morning with gratitude and threw myself into every new task. I received incentives and promotions much beyond what my younger self could have ever dreamed of. I saved enough for a down payment on a home while my career took off. I couldn't help but think about my parents and Jessica on the day I signed the mortgage papers because they had never been able to manage their finances well enough to own a home. We hadn't communicated in years, so it's unlikely that they would learn about my accomplishment. Then came the call that made all the difference. A severe heart attack had struck my grandfather. By the time I got to the hospital, he was gone. My grandma seemed to lose her spark after spending more than 50 years by his side. She followed him less than 2 months later. I was in the parlor organizing my grandmother's funeral when I heard a voice I recognized. "Ashley, would you like assistance making the arrangements?" I turned and saw my mom. She was older and more worn out than I had recalled. Something in her eyes made me think twice before telling her to go. "Yes," I said in a quiet voice. "It would be pleasant." Over the course of the following few days, my parents started to open up as we planned the service. They acknowledged that they were having financial difficulties. One time, while we were selecting flowers, my father remarked, "Retirement hasn't been kind to us." And with the twins of Jessica. "Twins?" Startled, I broke off. "Yes, 4-year-olds, my mom answered with a small smile. "What lovely boys. However, we assist where we can because Jessica and Michael are still unable to handle alone." I kept my face expressionless as I nodded. There are some things that never change. We gathered in a wood-paneled office for the reading of the will 1 week after my grandmother was laid to rest. The tension in the room was palpable as I sat across from my parents, Jessica, and Michael. Mr. Patterson, the notary, put on his spectacles and started reading. He remarked, "We leave our home at 1542 Maple Street and the amount of $150,000 to our dear granddaughter Ashley." There was a deafening silence that ensued. Jessica's jaw dropped wide in disbelief, and my mother's knuckles turned white as she seized my father's arm. Mr. Patterson read on after clearing his throat. He turned to face my mother and added, "And a personal note from Mr. Henderson to his daughter Margaret. Remember, Margaret, that we provided you with $200,000 just when you needed it most. We trust that you will respect our ultimate choice, just as we respected your needs." My mother's face turned pale after flushing hot. As my father gazed at the floor, Jessica and Michael exchanged anxious looks. After the will reading, my parents came up to me in the parking lot, their once confident manner from the funeral planning now tinged with desperation. My mother said in a shaky voice, "Ashley, honey, you must understand. We always assumed the house would be ours. We were relying on it. We're having trouble." My dad combed through his thinning hair. "The house would be very helpful for Jessica's family's expenses and the mortgage." The years of neglect, the incessant reminders that I wasn't wanted, and their refusal to pay for my education came back to me as I looked at them. "No," I firmly answered. "I own the house. This is what Grandma and Grandpa wanted." Even as Jessica interjected that her twins needed a yard to play in, they followed me begging to my car. Remaining strong, I got into my car and drove off. My mother called me a week later to invite me to supper. She spoke in an extremely modest tone. I agreed against my better judgment. The house looked worse than I remembered when I got there. The gutter sagged, the paint was peeling, and the previously immaculate grass was overgrown and spotty. The house was neat yet chaotic inside. Tommy and Jake, Jessica's twins, sprinted around the living room, their curly hair and sparkling eyes endearing yet vivacious. My mother pulled me into an awkward embrace and murmured, "Ashley, your favorite pot roast was prepared by us." "It's not my favorite," I responded without thinking. "Jess loves that the most." My father clearing his throat was the only sound to break the uneasy stillness that ensued. "Well, how about sharing your favorite food with us?" he inquired. They looked genuinely interested, which surprised us. "We'd love to know." They inquired about my job, my house, and my hobbies over supper. They paid close attention as I discussed my financial profession, even though a lot of it was beyond their comprehension. Another dinner followed, and then another. Before long, I was bringing gifts for the twins, enjoying holidays with them, and even helping Jessica with her schoolwork. I sometimes offered to help when they indicated that the house needed repairs. I even painted the front of the house, paid for a new roof, and restored the heating system. My parents wept with appreciation each time I sent them a check. My mother would embrace me and say, "You're too kind to us, we don't deserve this." I often thought, "You're right," but I never actually said it out loud. A tiny part of me remained hopeful that people might change in spite of all the years of abuse and neglect. As the years went by, my career kept growing. New chances arose with each promotion, and my investments increased dramatically. At the same time, I felt that my relationship with my parents was getting better. They were both already over 70, and I began to wish I could do something meaningful for them. I said, "I've been thinking," as I watched my father strain to get out of his chair at one of our Sunday dinners. "I'd like to purchase a new home for you. Something comfy for your retirement years that is single-story, has a lovely garden, and is easier to maintain. You are no longer a good fit for this house." I was astounded by their reactions, which were sincere joyous tears. We spent weeks looking for a house together before locating the ideal one. A stunning ranch-style home in a quiet neighborhood with spacious entrances and no stairs. After I closed my checkbook, my parents continued to remark about how thrilled they were. My father responded, "We need to plan a suitable housewarming party." A knot of bitterness tightened in my stomach as I observed the celebration from the shadows across the street. Inside, my parents' friends mixed with relatives I hardly knew. With their faces flushed with excitement, Jessica, her husband, and their twin boys were the center of attention. I was the afterthought daughter they had never trusted, and I was the reason for it all. Radiant, my parents walked through the crowd like kings and queens, having at last achieved their long-held goal of owning a lovely home that would serve as a symbol of security and comfort. I gave a sour laugh. I hadn't even received an invitation to the party from them. I felt like an outsider to their enjoyment, a foreigner. The realization was a sharp pain that echoed the years of disregard and apathy I had experienced. I recalled the hours I had spent studying while Jessica relished the results of their constant support, the sacrifices I had made, and the lonely nights I had spent daydreaming about leaving our home's oppressive atmosphere. And now here they were, enjoying my triumph without realizing the pain they had brought about. I stayed put because of a deep-seated dread of rejection that had been ingrained in me since I was a young child. In front of their visitors, I wanted to storm across the street, confront them, and reveal their hypocrisy. Instead, I felt a wave of blazing, searing rage. With the sounds of their jubilation fading behind me, I turned and left. Long after the music ended, the unfairness of it all left a foul taste in my throat. That evening, I decided something. I would no longer be the unseen hand that kept their lives afloat, their silent benefactor. I would separate myself, retreat, and shield myself from more harm. My parents' reactions when I informed them that I was severing my relationship were predictable. Shock, incredulity, and charges of ingratitude. My voice still lacked the warmth I had compelled myself to display throughout the years. I experienced a strange mixture of relief at finally being freed from their emotional control, sadness for the family I had never really known, and longing for the love I had always craved when I hung up the phone. It was an opportunity to start again and live my life as I saw fit, free from the burdens of the past. Years went by. I created a meaningful and purposeful existence. My career took off, and I found solace in the quiet fulfillment that came from my work. I purchased a modest, cozy home that was really mine. I even found a loving man who accepted me for who I am. The news then struck me like a blow to the body. All the old scars, all the years of bitterness and contempt, returned with a vengeance. I struggled with my emotions, torn between the desire for revenge and a persistent sense of duty. The days became restless nights. The fallen leaves crunched underfoot as I strolled down the well-known streets in my area. Every step was like traveling through my memory maze. I reflected on my grandparents, whose steadfast love shone brightly in the shadows of my early years. Their compassionate and wise faces seemed to be whispering in the breeze, pleading with me to forgive. I finally made the decision to break out from the pattern of abandonment and neglect that had molded my existence. Instead of being angry, I decided to face my parents with the quiet respect they had never shown me. My mother, who had formerly been strong and authoritative, was now slender and bewildered, her eyes clouded with terror. My father clung to her hand with a desperation that reflected my own boyhood desire, his once strong voice now reduced to a ragged whisper. I went to see them in the nursing home, a cold, impersonal structure that smelled of decay and disinfectant. I had a peculiar sense of calm when I saw them in a way, devoid of their strength and pretense. A deep melancholy took the place of the rage that had festered for so long. They were the ones who had given birth to me. They were still my parents in spite of their faults and failures. It wasn't simple. My hard-won tranquility was challenged by occasional bursts of hatred and hostility. But I remained with them day after day. I met their demands and gave them the attention and consolation they had long denied me. My mother looked at me with a clarity I hadn't seen in years one evening as I sat next to her bed and held her weak hand. With a shaky voice, she replied, "Ashley, I'm so sorry we neglected you." My eyes filled with tears. It was the recognition of the hurt they had inflicted, the apology I had longed for all my life. I became aware that I had at last escaped at that instant. I was no longer bound by the past. I could move on with my life, forgive, and heal. We discovered a shaky calm in those final days, a provisional comprehension that went beyond years of pain and disappointment. Although it wasn't the perfect family I had envisioned, it was sufficient. In a tale that had started with neglect and finished with forgiveness, it was closure, the last chapter. My 5-year husband abruptly and mysteriously filed for divorce. But I heard a startling exchange with his friend that told me everything. 5 years ago, I, a 30-year-old woman, married my 32-year-old husband. After almost 2 years of dating, I was completely smitten with him. I therefore said yes, without hesitation when he proposed to me. I was a surgeon at the time, and my husband was an actor who was having trouble finding a job. I paid for practically everything in the house, but I didn't mind at all. I was more than willing to pay all the bills since I wanted him to pursue his goal. Despite frequently being cast as an extra in most sequences and earning only half of what I did, he never gave up. He recently got a small part in a feature-length movie. I was ecstatic for him. For him, it was a huge event even though he just had 10 to 15 minutes of screen time. Everything appeared to be going well, and in a few weeks they were set to begin filming for his part. But 5 days ago, my husband unexpectedly served me with divorce papers, and my entire world came apart. I was caught completely off guard. I didn't think he would ask me to get a divorce. I felt the same way about him as he had about me. Everything happened so quickly. He said he no longer felt the same way about me when I asked him why. He claimed that now that he was at last receiving serious offers, he wanted to focus more of his time and efforts on his work. He said that this was only the beginning of his career and that he desired a new beginning, one that excluded me. He claimed that the burden of his former life, which reportedly included me, could not hold him down. I was heartbroken. It was unbelievable to me that he was saying this after all the sacrifices I had made and the times I had put his aspirations ahead of my own. That day, I sobbed for hours and pleaded with him to reconsider our marriage, but he refused to listen. He said that he no longer felt anything for me and that there was nothing more to be done. He thought it would be better if we split up now. I was devastated when he packed up his things and departed. I spent the following 4 days completely lost. I was so depressed that I didn't even go to work. I kept hoping that this nightmare would end. After that, my hubby called me yesterday. He had a meeting the following day, so he asked if I could leave some of his formal attire at his friend's house, where he was staying. In the hopes of meeting him face to face and perhaps persuading him to return, I gladly consented. I had no choice but to go to his friend's apartment since I was desperate. When I got there, I heard my husband and his friend conversing inside, and I saw that the door was slightly open. As I was ready to knock, his friend asked him why he had married me in the first place if he had no intention of staying. I was interested in that. I made the decision to remain silent and listen in the hopes of learning more. I had entered at the perfect, if unpleasant time, and it felt like they had already been discussing me. My husband laughed before responding to his friend's inquiry, and he continued by saying that he married me simply to utilize me to advance in his job. He acknowledged that his heart didn't love me. He had cheated on me numerous times over the years with unidentified women he met at parties or on set. I nearly gasped, but I was able to hold myself back. I wanted to hear more from my beloved hubby. He went on to say that a friend of his had introduced us, telling him that I was the daughter of a well-known dentist. My dad is among the state's top dentists, so that much was accurate. My husband was also aware that my dad frequently worked with a well-known actor. Some of his acquaintances in the business had told him about this. Everything started to make sense to me as he talked. He described how he had reached out to me in a desperate attempt to salvage his acting career. It was only a plus that I was rich and, in his opinion, easily influenced. He claimed to love me for 5 years while he waited for a chance to meet my dad's well-known customer. About 5 months ago, at my dad's 50th wedding anniversary celebration, that chance presented itself. Many of my dad's acquaintances, including his most well-liked customer who was also a close friend, were invited. My husband charmed him, spoke with him at the party, and even exchanged phone numbers with him. I didn't know at the time. Due to his hectic schedule, my dad's customer was only at the party for approximately 30 minutes, but within that brief period, my husband was able to get his number. Even though I hate him today, I must admit that when my spouse feels like it, he can be very charming. I wasn't shocked that he was able to pull it off. But I was surprised to learn that my husband had spent 5 years of our life together, causing me unspeakable heartache, all for his own self-serving ends. And to top it all off, I helped him get his current position. On the recommendation of my dad's client, the film's director signed him. I am the one who has been betrayed and is now being discarded through divorce, even though I am the one who made this huge career breakthrough. At that moment, I wanted to go in and give him a face punch, but I controlled myself. I drove home after making my way back to my car on foot. I had plenty of time to analyze my anger and devise a strategy to exact revenge on this self-centered monster because this incident occurred yesterday afternoon. I tried to relax by meditating after I got home. I was enraged and worried that if I didn't manage my emotions, I may physically harm him. I made every effort to divert my attention and devise a scheme to ruin him. Asking my dad for the actor's number, calling him, and insisting that my husband be removed from the movie was one of my first ideas. But since it was a professional issue, I wasn't sure if it would work or if my viewpoint would be taken seriously. I've known my dad's client since my undergraduate days. He knew me much better than he knew my husband, even though we weren't really close. After speaking with my parents, I finally thought it was worth a shot and gave him a call in the evening. I thought there was still a chance to make things better, so I hadn't notified anyone about the divorce yet, not even my family. I was so anxious because this was the first time I was going to admit it. His assistant finally got me through after multiple calls. Following some awkward small conversation, I spoke without pausing and said everything I needed to say. I revealed that my husband had cheated on me and secured a movie role through my dad's and my connections. I requested that he use his power to get my husband fired, stating that this would be the correct thing to do if there was any justice in the world. I'm sure he was as uneasy hearing it as I was speaking it since I said it all at once. There was a pause before he stated he would investigate. After saying thank you, he hung up. The whole experience made me feel ashamed, but it was over. At this point, my only option was to wait for a response from him or my spouse. About 10 o'clock at night, 2 hours later, my spouse began calling me in a panic. I understood then that he must have already been dismissed. I was shocked at how fast it had transpired. I texted the man who made it happen to say thank you. He hadn't had much trouble taking care of it because there hadn't been a legal contract, just a verbal understanding. He responded to my text with good wishes for the future, which I found to be quite considerate and gave me hope again. Without a care in the world, I turned off my phone, disregarded all of my husband's calls and texts, and went to bed. I'm not lying when I say that I had the best sleep of my life. As I was getting ready to go for work this morning, I heard my husband yelling for me from outside my door and pleading with me to open it. I told him to go because I had to leave for work and didn't intend to let him in. He was unwilling to give up though, and insisted that I have one final conversation with him before removing him from my life. I eventually grew tired of his shenanigans and let him in, telling him that I would not waste my time again. He sobbed as he dropped to his knees and admitted that he had erred. He pleaded for another opportunity, saying that I was the only woman he had ever loved. However, I no longer felt sorry for him because I knew how talented an actor he was. After letting him cry for a few minutes, I inquired about the success of his acting role in the movie. I deliberately used a mocking tone because, let's face it, that's precisely what I was doing. He appeared shocked for a second before realizing what had happened. He went crazy when he realized that I was the reason he had lost the chance of a lifetime. He began yelling in my face, saying that I had ruined his life and that I would be held accountable. I also didn't hold back. I shouted back at him, telling him that he deserved this, if not worse, because he had destroyed 5 years of my life. After what seemed like 5 minutes of us yelling at one another, he finally broke down. He was aware that no amount of yelling and yelling would restore what he had lost, neither the role nor the happy life he had been having with me. He was solely responsible for his own actions. Even though he was crying, he made sure to tell me that he would take everything from the divorce and leave me on the streets, which made me feel almost terrible for him. Those were fairly audacious remarks, and any pity I might have had for him was instantly gone. I told him to leave my place as respectfully as possible. He complied, leaving while still sobbing and mumbling obscenities. That day, I made the decision to skip work once more. I wasn't feeling well, and the events had been terrible and weighty. First update. At last, I disclosed the divorce to my family and acquaintances. They were just as caught off guard as I had been when my spouse initially expressed his desires to me. But they were all appalled when I told them what I had heard at his friend's place. They even said that what he had done to me was far worse than my vengeance. When my dad learned that my husband had taken advantage of both him and me to further his objectives, he became quite angry. He wanted to go to my husband's house and use his fists to make him understand, but I was able to calm him down. I'm happy that most people concur that my actions were appropriate. My husband's treatment of me was so harsh. It permanently damaged my trust in marriage and men. He deserved to be punished for his efforts, in my opinion. I had spent many years and a significant amount of money on our marriage, just as he had spent years on his work. I don't think it matters that I destroyed his career on my own if he could destroy our marriage on his own. He keeps contacting me online, pleading with me to retract my remarks and assist him in regaining the part, as if he had been cheated out of a chance. Despite my efforts to block his accounts, he continues to create new ones out of desperation. I'm now thinking of completely stepping away from social networking. After everything he's done, I don't see why he feels entitled to get in touch with me. I hope he eventually understands that he's done and that there's no turning back. It appears that his threats to destroy me throughout the divorce were mostly verbal. We both understand that he cannot harm me in any way. Second update. A few days ago, I erased my social media account and blocked my husband. But it appears that I also need to update my phone number. I've had between 70 and 80 spam calls from various numbers since last night. I'm going wild over it. My phone is constantly buzzing every few minutes, and it's always from a different number. I know it's him, but I'm not sure how he's doing it. I even gave him a call to tell him to stop and to be aware that his actions would have an impact on the settlement. I was obviously bluffing. No deal is possible. I was attempting to use it as leverage to get him to quit pestering me, even though I owe him nothing. He was adamant about denying any role in the calls though. His voice made it clear to me that he was lying, which only made me feel more irritated. As I was about to cry at the end of the conversation, he hinted that if he were to miraculously regain his role, the calls may cease. The final straw was that. I yelled as many colorful profanities as I could at him before shutting off my phone. I have been using my laptop to surf the internet and have yet to switch it back on. I only intend to switch my phone back on after I have a new number. Since he will no longer be able to reach me, hopefully it will stop him from making me insane. Everyone is aware that I will not challenge the divorce. In a few days, we are expected to appear in court. I don't understand why he is acting inappropriately when he is well aware that we will soon be in court together. He is also aware that if I so desired, I could make his situation far worse. I'm lucky he doesn't. I want to let this whole thing go without a struggle since I've already done what I have to do. I can't go on if I hold on to this anger and allow him to bother me. I'm eager to close this phase of my life. I don't care what happens to him. I'm no longer concerned about his future success or failure. Third update. My husband and I are scheduled to appear in court the day after tomorrow. Naturally, he couldn't allow that to occur without acting in a crazy or psychotic manner. I was certain that he could no longer contact me because I had canceled my social media accounts and changed my phone number. I believed that he would be forced to give up since I had finally defeated him. But I didn't realize how insane he really is. My hubby unexpectedly showed up and sat down next to me in the passenger seat last night as I was getting ready to drive home. Before I could even react, he closed the doors. I quickly retrieved my pepper spray from my purse after realizing what was going on. He grabbed the purse and threw it into the back car, but I was too late. I was so scared that I was willing to do anything he asked me to get out of this predicament safely. It became even more frightening when he spoke to me in a calm manner. When he stated that he didn't want much, I called my dad's actor client, retracted my statement, and made sure he was given his role back. I pretended to agree, telling him that in order to make the call, I required my phone out of my handbag. Now, my hubby is definitely stupid, but I'm not. When he gave me the handbag, I immediately reached for my pepper spray and sprayed him with half of it at once. His condition was much worse than mine, which was watering and stinging horribly. He was having trouble breathing, spluttering and coughing. I pulled him out of the car, unlocked the doors, and drove off, leaving him coughing on the ground. Before I had to stop, I had only made it out of the parking lot and a few yards from my place of employment. I realized I couldn't drive home in my current state of vision impairment, so I got out of my car. Fortunately, a taxi arrived, and the driver appeared to be a friendly individual. He volunteered to drive me to the closest police station after seeing something was strange. Without hesitation, I agreed. The 2 hours that followed were a haze. After what had transpired in the parking lot, I was still in shock. Although I had always known my spouse was insane, this was much more than I had anticipated. It was difficult to accept that after 5 years of a happy marriage, this man was suddenly causing me to suffer through this nightmare. Fortunately, he was taken into custody. Because of his condition, he had been unable to leave the parking lot. His face was still red and a little puffy when they took him to the station. The fact that he was in pain made me happy. I left the station after pressing charges, but I went to my parents' house instead of home. I haven't left their house since I got there because I no longer felt safe being by myself. The support from my parents has been tremendous. One little comfort during this journey has been that they have been treating me like their little girl once more. This time, I'm not stopping my dad from fulfilling his commitment to make sure my husband receives a suitable punishment. It is imperative that certain guys realize that they cannot bully women and get away with it. Fourth update. Hello to everybody. A few weeks have passed since my last update, and I'm pleased to report some positive developments. For what he did to me, my husband received a 3-month prison sentence and a hefty fine. I believe this result is fair, even though I wish the punishment had been lengthier. Given the circumstances, we were able to expedite the divorce process, and it will be completed much sooner than typical. I'm so relieved that he doesn't have any compensation rights. In order to make sure he can't find me again, I've also sold the house and my car. In addition to being superior, the new hospital where I work is also nearer to my parents' house. For me, commuting is far more convenient. Even though my spouse can no longer reach me, at least not for the foreseeable future, they won't let me return to living alone, so for the time being I'm still living with my parents. To my surprise, I don't mind remaining with them. As I'm still getting over the shock of everything that's transpired, their support has been consoling. In order to better digest my feelings, I've also begun going to therapy. I'm aware that recovery will take time and that things won't return to normal right away. I try my hardest to move on, but sometimes I can't help but think back on the years we had together. Some of the moments felt so real that it's difficult to realize it was all falsehoods. Every time I find myself thinking about him, I make myself recall the events that followed, particularly the parking lot incident. That brings me back to the here and now. I'm taking things one day at a time, even though I know these wounds won't heal right away. I'm hoping that I'll be all right shortly. And to be honest, I can't wait for that day. Am I the asshole for canceling my wedding after learning my fiancé only agreed due to family pressure and doesn't want to be a husband or father? My wedding was scheduled for last week, but I ran away the night before, so it never happened. I'm a 26-year-old woman. After 3 years of dating, I was engaged to my 26-year-old boyfriend for 6 months. Together, my now ex-fiancé and I had 2 kids. Twin boys who are 1 year old. My boyfriend was initially quite opposed to me having children, and the pregnancy wasn't planned. I was obstinate, though, and informed him that I would have them whether or not he agreed. I thought I could raise my children on my own, so I offered him the opportunity to leave and didn't even ask for child support. The time seemed appropriate for me, and I've always had a strong mother instinct. I was prepared to become a mother. He initially objected, attempting to convince me to end the pregnancy. I made it plain that I would end our relationship if he persisted in pressing me. It was then that he appeared to change his mind. He was a supportive spouse during the pregnancy and a good parent to our sons when they were born. I'll admit that I might not have been able to handle it alone, and we hadn't anticipated twins. I considered myself fortunate that he stayed. I accepted his proposal 6 months after the birth of our sons. It seemed as though he had never previously objected to the pregnancy. I was ready to forgive and go on because he had been so lovely and encouraging. After 3 years of dating and the birth of our first child, it seemed appropriate to tie the knot. We spent months organizing the wedding, and I was truly delighted. My parents, who really liked my ex-fiancé, were also overjoyed. He appeared to be the ideal man. However, everything fell apart the night before the wedding. I suppose it rescued me from what could have been a terrible marriage, but it's hard to imagine that one phone call could end a 3-year relationship. As is traditional, my ex-fiancé and I were staying apart the day before our wedding. He was at his family's house a few blocks away, and I was at our house. He called me after supper to let me know that he was eager to marry me and that he loved me. His remarks moved me to tears. I waited for him to hang up after we said our goodbyes and enjoyed a sweet moment on the phone. Regretfully, or luckily, maybe, he neglected to end the call. I believe that, contrary to his usual practice, he did not press the screen firmly enough. I chose to listen in on their chat because I was curious and could hear his father's voice, so I stayed on the line. He was recently asked by his father if he had been speaking to me. My ex sounded glum and aloof when he responded to his father. I knew right away that something wasn't right. Even though a week has gone by, the events that followed are constantly replayed in my mind. He replied in the affirmative when his father inquired if he still felt the same as he had 2 days prior. His mother then entered the discussion and advised him to proceed with the wedding regardless of his feelings. My boyfriend appeared to lose his temper a bit and told his parents that they couldn't treat him this way and that he would do whatever he pleased. In response, his father said that although they couldn't make him marry someone he didn't love, they could remove him from their family, therefore it was up to him to decide. Then his mother spoke up, telling him that he had to mature and become responsible now that he was a father. She said that although it was already terrible that he had children before marriage, he could still turn things around by getting married rather than delaying it because he didn't feel ready. She believed that if he was prepared to have children, he was also prepared to commit to marriage. His dad felt the same way she did. My ex started to object, claiming that it was unfair that he was being forced to wed me merely to avoid being kicked out of their relationship. He bemoaned how no one in his life appeared to care if he was prepared for milestones or not, and he accused them of being unjust. He claimed that he always had to deal with situations for which he was unprepared. He complained that his parents, who had made him stay with me in spite of his anxieties about becoming a dad, and I didn't give a damn about whether he was ready to be a father. Even though he still didn't feel ready, they were now pressuring him to be married. He persisted in griping about how unfair he was being treated by everyone. After that, I believe he left his phone in the room and rushed out. When I eventually hung up, his parents were still talking about how careless their son was. I was dumbfounded and unsure of what to do. Only after his parents threatened to divorce him against their will did my boyfriend agree to marry me and live with me. I certainly did not anticipate finding out about this the evening before our wedding. I sat in shock for the next 5 minutes. His actions had not shown that he wasn't prepared. He had always been a good parent and boyfriend, even though we had a fight when I told him I was expecting. I was unaware that these were his actual emotions. There's no denying that he was a brilliant performer. I made the decision to flee as soon as I was able to gather myself. I was lucky to have my children with me. A little out of town, I got into my car and drove to a hotel. By the time I got there, it was late, and my children were being grumpy. Without providing an explanation, I blocked my partner and his family after putting them to sleep. That was it. Knowing that the previous year had been nothing more than a massive lie, I sobbed all night long. Around 4 a.m., I finally dozed off. My ex's parents had paid for the wedding location and all other expenses. I didn't care about the money being spent because they were affluent. After all, they had come up with the entire notion. The three of them could handle the fallout. I texted all of my friends and family to let them know that the wedding was off and that I would explain everything tonight before I went to bed. I didn't give any more information. I told everyone not to respond to any messages from my ex or his family, nor should they go near them. I knew my people would follow my instructions without question because I trusted them. I ate my feelings and played with my sons, who were the only people I wanted around me at the time, at the hotel on the day I was meant to get married. Even though I was heartbroken and devastated, I had to put up a brave front for their benefit, and I did just that. I made the decision to return home after taking a day off in order to get my belongings and leave the house. I had already dropped my children off at my parents' house. A day later, I eventually made it to the house, and my ex's reaction was precisely what I had anticipated. I'm still not sure how much of his panicked, worried appearance was real and how much was an act. He appeared to have lost sleep. He said he had been quite concerned about me and asked me where I had been. He went on a tirade about how he and his family had waited for hours on the wedding day without waiting for me to answer. He claimed that I owed them an explanation and a public apology because of what I did, which was unacceptable. Cold feet was no justification, he said, for degrading him and his family in this manner. I said very little. I only informed him that I had just overheard him talking to his folks. For a few seconds, he appeared perplexed, but when he understood what I was talking about, he had the good sense to appear embarrassed. After that, I didn't bother to speak with him or provide any more explanation. He waited outside in the yard while I entered the house. Without saying another word, I gathered my necessities and departed. To be honest, I didn't know what to say to him. I was doing what I believed to be right, and he was doing what he believed to be right. I had lost interest in being a wife. Being a good mother was all I wanted. We hadn't spoken since that nearly a week ago. I believed it to be our demise. I had run out of things to say to him, and he appeared to agree. Or so I believed. He arrived at my parents' house a few hours ago and begged to talk to me. My parents and all of my close friends were aware of what had transpired at this point. Despite my parents' skepticism, I consented to have one final conversation with him. Since the babies had just gone to sleep, I didn't want us fighting or screaming and waking them up, so I didn't let him in. We conversed in the front yard instead. Even though he doesn't feel ready to marry me just yet, he told me he genuinely loves me and apologized for everything he had done to me. He added that he still wants to be a part of our lives and that he loves the children in spite of what he said that evening. I was at a loss for words. Since he had been deceiving me and being phony for about a year, I wasn't sure whether I could trust him again. I was skeptical, of course. Nevertheless, I promised him I would consider my options. He stated that instead of ending things, he wants to try to make things better and give us another chance, free from his parents' meddling. To be honest, I have no idea how to respond to that. Even though I want my children to grow up with their father, I simply cannot trust him at this time. Personally, I could really use a vacation because this week has been really hectic. What if I choose not to give our relationship another chance? That's what I'm left wondering. First update. Hello everyone, I realize it has been a long, but I haven't had time to update you because I've been so busy with work, kids, and moving out. I'm incredibly appreciative of all the love and guidance I've received, and the support has been tremendous. It has been tremendously beneficial throughout this difficult period. Yes, I have discussed custody arrangements with a lawyer. I've made the decision not to reconcile with my ex, thus I want exclusive custody of my children. It was absurd and judgmental of some people to send me harsh texts calling me a selfish mother for even thinking about getting back together with him. In addition to being a mother, I'm a human. Only a week had passed since that phone conversation, and naturally, I still hadn't moved on. After all, it had been a 3-year relationship. I thought about giving him another chance for a moment, but I was emotional because I truly did love him. But today, I feel a lot more stable. I understand that regardless of how I feel about the circumstance, I must prioritize my children and myself. There is no way to get back together with him. All of that hatred and condemnation wasn't necessary in the first place, but I should have anticipated it given that this is the internet. 2 days after calling off the wedding, I began searching for a lawyer. Finding someone I completely trusted and felt at ease with took some time. Because we never imagined this day would arrive, my ex and I had never talked about custody arrangements. I must now take legal action to make sure that no one can take my children away from me. I'm not sure about his parents, but I don't think my ex would even want custody. Given how traditional and conservative they are, I have no doubt that they would be upset if their son were denied custody of their grandchildren. I'm getting ready for any pushback they may give me. My ex and I haven't communicated since our last conversation, which was 3 days ago. This demonstrates to me that his statements about wishing to resolve the conflict were untrue and pointless. He hasn't followed up on me, even though he should have if he really wanted to make things work. I'm certain that not pursuing him again is the right course of action. I won't be with a man who doesn't sincerely want to be with me, and there is no trust left between us. It's great this way. The last thing I need on my plate right now is for him to become upset over the custody arrangement, so I'm going to let him know my decision shortly and hope he doesn't. Second update. Finally, I told my ex that I didn't want to reunite with him and that, just to let him know, I would be requesting full custody. I thought he would be okay with it. He should have been appreciative that I wasn't pressuring him into something for which he wasn't ready because, after all, he acknowledged that he wasn't ready for marriage or children. He didn't, however, take it well. He began to argue with me, claiming that I was unable to harm him in this way. He said that although I could end our relationship if I so desired, I couldn't take his children away from him. Now, if our relationship had been normal, that would have made sense, but it isn't. My ex didn't want children in the first place, as you are fully aware. He wasn't prepared to become a parent until a week ago, but all of a sudden he was battling for custody of the children. I was certain that something was wrong and that his parents were probably still attempting to manipulate him. We were at a restaurant, and I was feeling really ashamed about the commotion he was creating, so I tried to calm him down as he was panicked throughout our argument. He eventually became a little more composed after some time. I couldn't afford a protracted custody dispute, so I made the decision to try to talk sense into his head. I lacked the funds and motivation to do it. Additionally, I was aware that his parents could hire the top attorneys, so even if I had the moral superiority, they might prolong the proceedings. Reasoning with him and hoping he wouldn't argue with me was my best course of action. I informed him that until a week ago, he had been claiming he wasn't prepared for children. I clarified that this was the best course of action for everyone. He could live his life as he pleased, free from the burdens of marriage and children, and I would take care of the children, which was what I wanted anyhow. It seemed like the only sensible course of action because I believed it was what he also wanted. He surprised me by telling me that he had changed his mind and felt prepared to become a father. It simply did not stack up. His declaration that he was prepared just strengthened my thoughts that something more was going on. He couldn't have abruptly changed his mind in a week if he hadn't felt prepared to become a father for a full year. He eventually told me the truth when I asked him if there was anything he wasn't telling me. His parents were responsible. Surprise, surprise. He had gone to his parents after I informed him I knew everything and the wedding was put off. They instructed him to swiftly put me straight. He came up to me a week later for that reason. His parents claimed that although they had come to terms with the fact that I would not wed him because it was now beyond their control, they would not allow him to lose custody of their grandchildren. If he didn't persuade me to accept shared custody, they threatened to cut him off once more. He was virtually pleading with me to accept a joint custody agreement at this time. I simply left because I was so repulsed. It was unbelievable to me that he was dancing to his parents' music once more. I had given him a free pass, but he was still unable to make up his mind. He wanted his parents' money more than he wanted to commit to me or become a father. I didn't want him near our children if that was his only concern. They were worthy of better. I didn't want him in my life or my children's lives in any way, therefore I didn't even want child support. He was obviously lacking in moral character and would stop at nothing to maintain his parents' favor. It was pitiful. I've blocked him everywhere once more in the days that have passed. I don't want to see or speak with him. In his final message to me, he suggested that we agree to share custody and that if his parents died, he would divide his inheritance with me. It's unbelievable that he's actually putting forward this absurdity for no other reason. I suppose this is my punishment for first falling for a pampered brat. I am a self-made lady who has risen through the ranks on my own. Although my parents did fund my education, we didn't have a lot of money. I had to work really hard for what I have now since I had to rely on scholarships to pay for college. My ex is the only son of parents who are very well off. You all know the type, so I doubt I need to elaborate. When he started dating me, I felt he had changed, and he really convinced me that he had. However, I was mistaken. He fooled me for a good 3 years, which proves he's a brilliant actor. I don't want to stay to find out more now that I can finally see him for who he really is. I'm finished. I have no problem raising my children by myself. A parent who doesn't even want to be a father is no better than any other father. I'm positive now that I made the right choice. Instead of turning this into a protracted custody dispute, I just hope he realizes his mistake and revokes his parental rights. I will continue to pray. Third update. Hi everyone, I'm here to finally tell you all some wonderful news. Although I've been quite busy, I realize it's been a while since my last update. First things first, I now live in a much smaller apartment with my babies, but it's mine at least. This house is really mine, unlike the one my ex and I shared. My parents can occasionally visit to help with the kids because it's close to their place. Since I obviously can't stop working, I've also hired a full-time babysitter to help me. I am extremely fortunate to be able to purchase this at this time. I am quite appreciative of my parents' financial support as well. They're trying their hardest, but none of us anticipated this. I consider myself lucky to have parents that are so devoted and encouraging. Now for the section about my ex that I know most people are interested in. He gave up his parental rights by signing. My best assumption is that either his parents gave up or he eventually stood up to them. I'm not sure what changed. I assume it's the former because a friend told me he moved out of their residence. A few days ago, he expressed regret to me and even offered to reimburse me financially. However, I had no intention of accepting money from my former partner. I don't care that some of you may believe that was a bad choice. When I stated that I no longer wanted to interact with him, I wasn't joking. I forgive him, but that doesn't mean I have to pay him back. All I want to do is go on. Without his assistance, my parents and I are more than capable of parenting my children. I responded to his text by telling him everything was okay but requesting that he stop contacting me. He has so far respected that. Giving my children the greatest life possible is my top priority right now. I no longer have the time to be depressed or upset about my ex. The only thing that counts to me is being the greatest mother I can be for my kids. Cast out by my family for favoring my golden child, sister, my aunt helped me. Now they seek my help. Am I the asshole for refusing? My life was completely upended 10 years ago when my family, particularly my sister Claire, chose to exclude me from the house. Why? I was viewed as a traitor by them since I managed to pay for my college education without their assistance. I had nowhere to go when I was 18 and ready to start college. All of this was made possible by Claire, the golden child, who consistently made me seem unimportant in contrast. Claire was my favorite from a young age, yet she is 4 years older than I am. She was the object of my parents' obsession. They would practically hold a celebration if she received an A. You understand what I mean when I say, "Oh, cool. What's for dinner?" When I receive an A. My parents treated Claire like a prodigy by the time she left for a prestigious business school. They covered everything, including her expensive clothes, condo, and tuition. I kept my head down in the meanwhile, knowing that I would have to work things out on my own. Upon being admitted to a prominent UK college to study history, I had the hope that I may receive some assistance. However, no. I was told directly by my parents that they were unable to pay for my education. Although I recognized the high cost of college, their refusal to even co-sign a loan really infuriated me. I only asked them to help me escape a lifetime of debt, not to cover everything. However, they declined. Their logic? They were also hoping to launch a small business at the time, so it seems that all of their resources were going toward that. We already paid for Claire's college. We have to think about our future now. I was stuck. When it came to me, my parents were all about being frugal and responsible. I didn't want to miss the opportunity to attend this college, but it felt like they were purposefully creating barriers for me. My parents had no difficulty spending a lot of money on Claire. I had no choice but to ask my Aunt Denise. My dad's older sister, Denise, is the total antithesis of my parents. In addition to being a brilliant neurosurgeon, she is also quite grounded. There was always this strange tension between her and my parents. They would pretend to be kind at family get-togethers, but it was obvious they were angry with her success. Especially my dad detested being overshadowed by her. At first, I didn't want to engage Denise, but I had to. I contacted her to see if she might cover my tuition. She made no hesitation at all. Of course, I'll help. Why didn't you come to me sooner? I was afraid my father would learn. He would go crazy if he found out that I had asked Denise for money behind his back. I therefore pleaded with Denise to keep it a secret. I believed I was safe for a while. I had paid my tuition and was preparing to go to school. Claire then made the decision to sabotage everything. I'm still not sure how she learned that I had asked Aunt Denise for assistance, but she did. And because she was Claire, she had to make it into a tremendous, dramatic ordeal rather than simply letting it go. I felt something wasn't right the moment I got home from a night out with some pals. Everything I owned was put in boxes. My books, my clothes, even my bed linens. Claire was standing there with this smug, self-satisfied expression on her face as my parents were seated in the living room. I had the impression that I had entered a perverse intervention. My father wasted no time. I had no idea what he was talking about, so I looked at the stack of papers he threw at me and said, "Explain this." I became aware that Claire had completely lost her mind at that point. She had created fictitious emails between Aunt Denise and me, giving the impression that I was betraying the family by disclosing information about their business plans in return for Denise covering my tuition. My eyes were unbelievable. In order to make it appear as though I had betrayed my family, Claire had combed through my laptop, discovered actual emails between Denise and me, and altered them using Photoshop or another program. I was taken aback. My parents refused to listen to me when I tried to explain that it was all a lie. No matter what I replied, they continued to say, "We trusted you and you stabbed us in the back." They obviously believed Claire. She was always believed by them. It seemed as though I had vanished from the world. They instructed me to immediately collect my belongings and depart. I told a total lie, which led to my official expulsion from the house. I pleaded with them to think again. Aunt Denise had already promised to cover my tuition, so I didn't want to put her through any more trouble. My parents, however, were unconcerned. They claimed they didn't want to interact with me and labeled me a traitor. That was it. I only had a few boxes of my belongings and the clothing on my back when I fled. Aunt Denise took me in. To be honest, I'm not sure how I would have managed without her. She immediately took me in and showed me the kind of family I hadn't experienced in years. Denise was the only person who truly cared about me while my parents were preoccupied with their future business and worshipping Claire. I will always be thankful for that. But even today, I can't get rid of the memories of that night. Claire standing there with that arrogant expression on her face, knowing she had won, my parents staring at me like I was a criminal, and all of my belongings packed away when I walked into my house. I was standing on Aunt Denise's doorstep, my life in boxes, having been evicted from my own home. I was still trying to figure out what the hell had occurred. It like a nightmare. In a single night, how does one go from feeling like a member of a family to experiencing homelessness? Even though the entire situation seemed bizarre, I couldn't claim to be all that shocked. Although my parents had always made it apparent that Claire came first, I never imagined it would go this far. Being the angel that she is, Denise embraced me wholeheartedly. She didn't pry or ask a lot of questions. She simply told me that her house was mine for however long I needed it after realizing how hurt I was. That type of generosity, man, it really got to me because I knew at that moment that I had never experienced anything like that from my own parents. I thus took up residence with Aunt Denise. Initially, waking up in her guest room and seeing a house that wasn't mine felt weird. But as time went on, it began to feel more like home than the location where I was raised. As we talked about everything, we got closer. As it happens, I had no idea how much Aunt Denise knew about my parents' actions. For years, she had avoided them and only attended family gatherings out of duty. She revealed to me something that completely shocked me. My father had harbored animosity toward her long before I was even born. It had always been Denise's turn. She attended medical school, married a wonderful man who tragically died young, and created a wonderful life. My dad was doing all right in the meantime, but he constantly felt like she was taking center stage. He was strangely competitive whenever they met. According to Denise, Their relationship had basically devolved into a contest to see who could appear more attractive to the other members of the family. However, my dad hated his sister rather than being proud of her. And it wasn't just about jobs, he felt dominated in practically every aspect of life, including money and society. Denise suspected that my parents' treatment of me had been influenced by their jealousy. Denise knew all of this years ago, but she chose to remain silent so as not to aggravate me. She told me everything now that I lived with her. She seemed to be filling in all the blanks in my life that had never made sense, like why my parents always went out of their way for Claire and why they never seemed to care what I did. It all came down to a strange family dynamic that I was completely unaware of. Although it was wonderful living with Denise, I was unable to fully unwind. I kept expecting my parents to call, for Claire to suddenly appear, or for them to say they were sorry. Naturally, though, that never took place. Weeks passed, and nothing happened. Not a single phone call, no text. I was initially incensed. How could they just ignore me as if I didn't exist? But eventually the rage subsided and I became numb. My brain seemed to be turning off all of my feelings so that I could continue to function. But Denise was fantastic. Unless I wanted to, Mom never forced me to discuss what had happened. She gave me time to think things through. She even made sure I had all I needed before I departed for the UK by helping me organize everything for school. I honestly don't know how I would have survived that period of time if it weren't for her. However, despite her backing, my parents' silence was terrible. You would think they would at least check in on your child after evicting them. However, no. A part of me still had expectations, even though I suppose I shouldn't have. Claire texted me about a month after the entire incident. It was just as annoying as she was, which is why I can still clearly recall it. The only thing it said was, "Hope you're doing okay. By the way, don't leave your laptop lying around." That was it. She reminded me that she was the reason I was expelled, but she made no attempt to apologize or acknowledge what she had done. As I gazed at the television, my blood began to boil. Simply put, she was making fun of me. I didn't answer. What was the purpose? There was nothing that made Claire feel bad. She thought that she had won some strange family game. I considered responding with a sarcastic text, but I realized it wouldn't change anything. She would simply relish the attention. After blocking her number, I made an effort to move on. It wasn't simple. A part of me was still hoping for a message from my parents every time I checked my phone. It could have been a passive-aggressive email from my dad acting as though nothing had occurred, or it could have been a message from my mom apologizing for everything. However, there was radio silence. Denise and I developed a strong routine in the months that followed. She evolved into more than simply my aunt. She became my companion, confidant, and essentially my sole remaining relative. I began to see how dysfunctional my parents truly were. They had devoted so much of their time to making Claire into the ideal daughter that they had neglected everything else. And it would be too late for them to correct it when Claire made a mistake, which she would eventually do. As I was preparing to leave for school, I received a second message, this one from my father. The message was brief and straightforward. Good luck in the UK. That was it. No explanation, no apology, nothing. It was like being slapped across the face. All he had to say after everything was, good luck. I didn't even know how to react, so I didn't. I tried not to worry about it and simply erased the message. Denise took me to the airport the day I departed for the UK. She gave me a firm hug and expressed her pride in me, saying she knew I would succeed. Those words, spoken to me by a member of my family for the first time in my life, struck me more strongly than I had anticipated. I felt as though I was leaving behind more than just my house when I boarded that plane. I was leaving behind the aspect of myself that had always aimed for my parents' favor. I made the decision that I no longer needed them after that. I had myself, I had Denise, and I had my future. I wasn't going to waste any more energy chasing after people who obviously didn't care about me, but if they wanted to get in touch, that's okay. I was finished. The UK was a terrific place to live. I made some friends, adapted to college life, and stopped worrying about my family all the time for the first time in years. Although I can't claim to have forgotten about them, I can say that I wasn't thinking about them as much. I was concentrating on my education, planning for the future, and simply attempting to live a life free from the stress of being my parents' shadow. Naturally, though, something had to happen and ruin everything just as everything was going well. I came back to my hometown after graduation, got a fantastic, well-paying job, and then my mother called. Yes, my mother. The same woman who had stopped talking to me ever since I was expelled. It came as a complete surprise. My phone buzzed while I was reviewing some notes for a paper in my dorm room. For a while, I thought I was seeing things when I saw her name appear. My thoughts were racing as I gazed at the television. Do I have to respond to it? Disregard it? Why was she calling me now, after all that had transpired? I gave it a few more rings. Then I took up, against my better judgment. Hello, I answered, attempting to sound composed despite my racing heart. She was unsure of what to say, as seen by the delay on the other end. At last she spoke something. Hey. It's your mom. Who else would it be, really? However, I didn't say that. After nearly 2 years of silence, I simply waited for her to explain why she was calling. After hesitating once again, she abruptly stated, "We need to talk." I couldn't resist laughing. She wanted to talk now? After all? It was really normal for her. However, despite my annoyance, I had a natural curiosity. Why was she contacting me after all this time, and what could possibly be so important? How about, I asked in the most neutral tone I could. She stammered as though she was trying to find the perfect way to say it. Your father and I, we want to see you? I could clearly see the direction of this. They didn't want to see me because they felt awful for throwing me out or because they missed me. They were in need of something and I was very certain of what it was. Why? I asked directly. Her delayed response just strengthened my suspicions. Her voice was quieter when she did talk, as if she was attempting to appear worried and maternal. I've been going through a difficult period with your dad. The pandemic has made things difficult. The true cause for the call was there. It was precisely what I had anticipated, financial difficulties. I knew their business wasn't doing well, but I hadn't heard much about it since I left. Denise had stated in passing that their shop wasn't doing as well as they had hoped, and it made sense that they were having trouble given the pandemic. But after everything they had done to me, I wasn't going to step in and save them. All right. And, I spoke in a flat tone, I had no intention of making things simple for her. She began, "Your sister, Claire, has been taking care of things for us, but..." I interrupted her at that point. Knowing where this was going, I said, "Let me guess. Claire messed everything up." Her response was sufficient, but there was a lengthy gap on her end. Claire had messed it up, of course. I had no idea why they were taken aback. She always cared more about how she looked than about putting in the effort. It was backfiring. They had trusted her with everything. My mother drew a breathless gasp. She said, "Things haven't been going as planned. And we require assistance." I chuckled. I was unable to resist. They wanted my assistance after everything, after kicking me out, interrupting me, and allowing Claire to run me over? It was unbelievable how bold it all was. Unbelievable, I whispered to myself. "What's so amusing?" my mother inquired, as though she was truly perplexed and couldn't comprehend why I wasn't seizing the opportunity to intervene and save the day. "Are you serious? Do you genuinely believe that I will assist you?" I said, raising my voice. All the feelings I had been suppressing for the last 2 years were rising to the surface, and I could feel the rage rising. Her voice faltered as she said, "We are your parents. We were not perfect, but... However, we require you." Even though she couldn't see me, I shook my head. "Mom, you weren't simply making mistakes. I was ejected from the house by you. You trusted Claire's falsehoods about your own child. You need me now that we haven't spoken in years? And all of a sudden, I'm expected to abandon everything and run?" After then, she was silent. She was clearly unsure of what to say. She most likely wasn't used to me advocating for myself in this way. I would have just followed their instructions when I was still living at home in the hopes that it would maintain harmony. However, it is no longer the case. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me again because I had changed. She spoke at last, but her voice was different. She no longer made an effort to sound kind and kind. She now sounded annoyed, as if she was surprised that I was being so challenging. Sharply, she remarked, "We're still your family. That is at least how much you owe us." The last straw was that. I responded icily, "I owe you absolutely nothing. Go ask Claire for aid if you need it. Remember that she's your golden child?" I hung up the phone without waiting for her answer. Even though my hands were shaking and my heart was racing, I experienced an odd sensation of relief. At last, I had expressed what I needed to. I wasn't going to help them sort out their mess. They could do it alone. I informed Aunt Denise about the situation over the phone that evening. She wasn't shocked in the least. She remarked, "They have been depending on Claire for years. It was only a question of time until everything caught up with them." After a lengthy conversation, I was even more convinced that I had made the proper choice. My parents were now suffering because they had favored Claire above me. Even though that seemed harsh, I wasn't responsible for correcting their errors. I felt free for the first time in a long time. I didn't require their acceptance or approval. I wasn't going to allow them to drag me back into their toxic mess now that I had my own life. I had survived their betrayal, therefore I had done my part. It was their time to face the repercussions now. First update. After that phone conversation with my mother, I believed that the family drama was over. To be honest, I was pleased with the way things turned out. At last, I had defended myself and stated unequivocally that I would not serve as their safety net. I assumed they would simply give up and resume relying on Claire. However, I didn't account for my sister's capacity to stir things up. Claire wasn't going to let me get away with it, of course. Something strange happened around 2 weeks after my mom and I spoke on the phone. A knock on the door interrupted my otherwise uneventful Saturday afternoon while I was tidying up around my house. I don't get many visits anymore. I was a little perplexed because I live alone and the most of my friends know to text before they visit. When I peered through the peephole, guess who was there? Yes, Claire. I briefly believed that I might be seeing things. Why had she come here? With the exception of that one dumb text concerning my laptop, she hadn't spoken to me in years, so why was she now showing up at my door as if nothing had happened? Although my first instinct was to ignore her, I knew Claire well enough to know that she would stay until she achieved her goals. Before I could say anything, she grinned as if we were best friends as I opened the door. "Hey," she exclaimed, sounding vivacious and phony. "A long time has passed." I was totally unprepared and just stared at her for a moment. "Yes, it has. Claire, what are you doing here?" She had this incredibly charming look on her face as if she believed she could win me back with charm. She tilted her head slightly and continued, "I wanted to talk." "May I enter?" I remained in the doorway with my arms crossed. "How about?" I asked, trying to sound as impartial as I could. For a moment, her smile wavered, but she immediately got it back. She tried to seem nonchalant as she said, "Come on. Maybe we should just speak inside?" It's crucial. I ought to have declined. I ought to have told her to go at that very moment. However, my curiosity overcame me. I didn't bother making her feel welcome, but I moved aside to let her in. I didn't ask if she wanted something to drink, and I didn't offer her a seat. After everything she had done, she was fortunate that I was still allowing her to enter my space. As she entered, she seemed to be taking in the space. She seemed to be trying to strike up a conversation when she said, "Nice apartment." I didn't answer. I wasn't here to make friends. "All right, Claire," I responded, cutting right to the chase. "What are you looking for?" She let out a loud sigh as if she was already worn out from the game she was playing. She folded her arms and replied, "Mom told me about your conversation. You know, she's pretty upset." I arched an eyebrow. "Angry?" "Claire, she threw me out of the house." "What is it that she must be upset about?" As if I were the one acting irrationally, Claire rolled her eyes. "Look, I'm not here to go over anything again. Both of us are aware that you have always been challenging." The casualness with which she said that nearly made me chuckle. "Hard," I said it again. "Are you for real now? To get me expelled from the residence, you made up emails. Is that challenging?" She dismissively waved her hand. "That's from long ago. I came here in order to put things right." Uncertain if I had heard her correctly, I blinked. "Would you like to put things right?" I asked, my words brimming with doubt. She nodded as if this were the most logical thing ever. "Yeah," she answered. "I think it's time to move past the family issues, even though I realize they got complicated and I may have overreacted at the time." What I was hearing was unbelievable. "Do you believe that you overreacted?" I spoke, straining to maintain a steady tone. "You ruined my relationship with our parents, Claire. You misled them and said lies about me, and now you're just standing here acting as if it doesn't even matter." I noticed that she was growing irritated as her smile dimmed a bit. "Remember, I didn't come here to dispute. I came to ask for your assistance." Finally, I realized why she was actually at my apartment. Claire wasn't here to apologize or make amends, of course. I had to give her something. My jaw tightened as I gazed at her, anticipating her next move. Finally letting go of the artificial sweetness, she stated, "I've been trying to keep the business going. However, it has been somewhat difficult. We were severely affected by the pandemic, and even though I'm doing everything I can, it's not enough. We are in danger of losing everything, even though Mom and Dad don't want to acknowledge it." With no pity in my heart, I crossed my arms. "I'm going to assume that you want me to help you out." Claire made an uncomfortable move. With defensiveness, she stated, "I'm not asking for a handout. I simply believe that we might be able to work something out together. I take it you're doing well for yourself? I assumed you would like to assist the family." She was unbelievable to me. She was attempting to use remorse to persuade me to save the family business, which she had destroyed. "You figured incorrectly," I replied bluntly. Claire blinked, obviously unprepared for that reaction. "What do you mean?" "Wait," I said firmly. "I mean, I'm not helping you. Not after all of what you have done. Claire, you destroyed my life. Now that you're in difficulty, you expect me to forget that I turned my own parents against me and come to your aid? Number?" She looked at me in disbelief. Claire was at a loss for words for the first time in her life. "But, we're family," she murmured haltingly, her confidence fading a bit. I gave a headshake. "We stopped being family the day you made it your mission to destroy me." Claire's expression turned pale. I could tell she was having trouble processing the fact that she wasn't used to hearing no. She stood up after a long awkward quiet. "Fine," she answered icily. "If that's how you want it." Saying, "That's how it's going to be." I refused to listen. "You made your choices, Claire. Now you have to deal with the consequences." She slammed the door behind her and ran out of the apartment without saying another word. I let the strain out of me for a minute as I stood there. I felt guilty, as if I had been too severe. However, that remorse quickly vanished as I realized everything she had done to me. I felt like I was in charge of my life for the first time in years. Claire's shadow no longer surrounded me. I wasn't the scapegoat or the second best option. At last, I was free of it all. Second update. After Claire stormed out of my apartment, I assumed that everything would die down and that she would finally realize that I was done with her and the whole family drama. Naturally, though, I didn't realize how obstinate she might be. The subsequent wave didn't even arrive a week later. Claire wasn't the one who knocked on my door this time. Both of my parents were involved. Funny how these things usually seem to happen on my days off, and it was a Saturday once more. The knock came as I was browsing through my phone while seated on the couch. And it wasn't soft. The knock was one of those loud, persistent ones that indicates the person on the other end isn't going anywhere anytime soon. I stood up, immediately suspecting who it might be. My mother and father were standing together like a united front when I opened the door. My dad appeared uneasy, as if he didn't want to be there. However, my mother? She was determined to clean up whatever mess had been caused, even if it took using force to get through it, according to the expression in her eye. I leaned against the doorframe and sighed. "What do you want?" I suppose my mother was trying to maintain a nice demeanor when she smiled at me. "Can we come in and talk? We need to sort some things out." I wanted to slam the door in their faces, but I reasoned that they would simply keep coming if I didn't let them in immediately. So I sighed loudly and moved aside to let them in. As they entered, they looked about as if they were expecting something more than a simple apartment. My mom immediately headed for the couch, sitting down and stroking the seat next to her as if I were a small child she was attempting to comfort, while my dad remained silent. I crossed my arms and replied bluntly, "I'll stand." "All right," she responded, her smile taut. "Look, we know things have been difficult between us," I said again, raising an eyebrow. "Difficult? That's what you're calling it?" When my dad did speak, it was in a rough, low voice. "We didn't come here to argue." Without even trying to disguise my annoyance, I questioned. "Then what did you come here for?" "Because I'm pretty sure we've already been over everything. Claire tried, you tried, and I made myself clear, I'm not helping." My mother's smile faltered a bit. She most likely wasn't used to me responding in this manner. She leaned forward a little and continued, "That's not why we're here. We're here because we want to apologize." It nearly made me chuckle. Apologize? For what, exactly? Kicking me out? Believing Claire's lies? Or was it that you didn't even bother checking in on me for 2 years? My dad shifted uneasily, as if he would rather be somewhere else than here, and my mom's face hardened. They obviously didn't anticipate me shoving it back in their faces in that manner. My mother added, "We know we made mistakes," in a softer tone. "But we're family, and family has to stick together." I could sense that I was getting impatient. It was just the same thing again. They would whip out the family card as if it were meant to wipe out all the bad things that had transpired. This time, though, I wasn't going to fall for it. I stated rather plainly, "You guys are only here because you need something from me. If things hadn't gone south with the business, I wouldn't even be hearing from you. Let's not pretend this is about family." There was silence for a while. When my dad did finally speak, it was in a rougher but more honest voice than I had heard him in years. "You're right." I was surprised by that. I stared at him and blinked. "What?" "You're right," he said again, letting out a deep sigh. "We screwed up. We believed Claire. We pushed you out, and we didn't even think twice about it. And now? Well, now things are falling apart, and we're desperate. I was at a loss for words. I didn't think he would be clean about it. In contrast, my mother appeared to be attempting to maintain her composure. She obviously hadn't anticipated that he would simply put everything out that way. I added, I appreciate the honesty, following a lengthy silence. But that doesn't change anything. Then, with a sharper voice, my mother interrupted. It doesn't change the fact that we need you, and you owe us, after everything we've done for you. Once more, that feeling of entitlement was present. They genuinely thought that simply because they were my parents, I owed them something, as if the years of disregard and partiality had no bearing, and that I should help them out now that they were having problems. I don't owe you anything, I stated icily. Not after the way you treated me. You made your choice when you believed Claire over me, when you threw me out and didn't even check if I was okay. Now you want me to save you? That's not how this works. My father remained silent. He just sat there looking shamefully at the floor. However, my mother? She had not finished yet. She raised her voice and shouted. We're your parents. We raised you, we took care of you, and now you're just going to abandon us? I nearly felt terrible for her now, so I shook my head. You didn't take care of me. Aunt Denise did. You chose Claire, and now you're stuck with her. That's on you. My mom looked like she was going to blow up, but my dad stopped her before she could say anything by placing a hand on her arm. For the first time since they entered, he looked me in the eye as he got to his feet. He answered, We understand, in a steady but dejected tone. We're not going to push you anymore, we just needed to try. I nearly felt sorry for him for a moment. That sympathy vanished though, when I realized all they had done to me. I said, I hope you figure it out, and moved to open the door for them. But I'm not going to be part of it. My father gave a nod, as if he had anticipated it, but my mother gave me one final glance, part indignant, half begging. However, she got up and followed him out when she realized I wasn't going anywhere. I shut the door after them and stood there for a while, allowing the silence to descend. I had succeeded? For the first time, I felt truly free since I had finally confronted them. In labor before my Sil's wedding, Mill locked me in a bathroom to avoid stealing the spotlight. I woke in the hospital. 2 weeks ago, Rick, 30 million, and I, 29 feet, had a daughter May. We are certainly thrilled to have our first child. As we get used to being new parents, things have been hectic. We're both having a difficult shift, but we're trying our hardest. Unfortunately, given what transpired on the day of May's birth, we are unable to offer much assistance. I don't think I will ever be able to forget it because it was one of the most painful events in my life. The overwhelming terror I experienced that day hasn't been replaced, not even by the happiness of May's arrival. If it weren't for my husband's prompt action, I genuinely think I would have passed away. I'm conflicted despite the terrible incident. Part of me feels that since it includes family, we need to be kinder to them, particularly as May is the family's eldest child. But because hormones and newborn responsibilities are impairing my judgment, I've turned to Reddit for support. Please be patient with me. There are a lot of characters in this story. The two younger sisters of Rick are Emma, 24F, and Anna, 28F. Both of them and I have always gotten along well, so I don't believe there is any hostility between us. Since each of us is preoccupied with our own lives and occupations, we are not particularly close. Even though Emma lives in a different city, we make an effort to communicate via phone or text whenever possible. My mother-in-law Rachel, 53F, is another significant character in this tale. I get along well with Emma and Anna, but Rachel and I don't get along. We don't agree, and I genuinely believe she has problems with everyone, not just me. Rachel has an obsession with control. Her responses range from criticism and pouting to full-blown tantrums with tears because she wants things to happen her way. Because she reared them alone after their father left them, her children, including Rick, usually abide by her desires. They make an effort to ease their own and her burdens. Rick allows me to keep my distance and handle his mother any way I see fit because he knows she may be challenging. I've always attempted to leave things be, even though Rachel can be somewhat controlling. I avoid her since she doesn't like me. Up until a few days ago, when everything went awry, this arrangement worked. Anna was getting married the day May was born. Her husband, Jonah, 30 million, is actually Rick's friend, and the wedding was lovely. About a year ago, he proposed to her, and I agreed to be a bridesmaid when Anna asked me to. I had to ask Anna to designate someone else as her maid of honor after Rick and I learned I was expecting. I was aware that I couldn't handle the obligations. This was just 6 months before the wedding and roughly 6 months after her proposal. I was 3 months pregnant at the time. Before informing Anna, I was really anxious. I was afraid that our connection would become permanently strained. I was relieved that didn't occur. When I told Anna the news, she was ecstatic. She even briefly forgot about getting married. "Obviously, I'll be taking care of you," she said when I told her that I couldn't perform the duties of maid of honor. She even thought about moving the wedding date so I wouldn't miss it, but that didn't work out in the end. Both sisters continued to work on getting ready for the wedding, with Emma filling in as maid of honor. In spite of this, they found time to help me during my really difficult pregnancy. Anna always stood by me without complaining, but I felt bad for missing her on such a significant day. Rachel, my mother-in-law, was the only one who appeared distressed. The wedding preparations were somewhat disrupted, and I believe she was irritated that I could no longer serve as the maid of honor. Rachel began to act hostilely toward me, while Anna was totally cool with my pregnancy and my absence from bridal chores. It was subtly persistent. I chose to dismiss it, assuming it was just her wedding stress or my hormones. The wedding day came 2 weeks ago. By that time, my feet were swollen, my abdomen was enormous, and I was severely pregnant. Anna wanted me there, so even though I was tired and felt like I could faint, I wanted to go. In order to avoid detracting from her special day, I had asked her in advance if my presence would pose any problems. I even had the thought that she was offended. Anna informed me that she only wanted her family to be there to support her and that she didn't care about fame or attention. She urged me to go and not be concerned about any drama. I trusted Anna because I knew how direct she was, and I felt obligated to support her despite my physical discomfort. I won't lie, there were a lot of whispers and murmurs regarding my presence on Anna's wedding day. I knew Anna was glad I was there, so I tried my best to ignore them. That was all I cared about at the time. But Rachel didn't talk to me very often. The whole time she scowled at me. I was too uneasy to pay any attention. I left her alone because I lacked the energy to confront her or figure out why she was acting in such a passive-aggressive manner. I wasn't going to react, so she could glare all she wanted. Then came the major incident, which really startled me and everyone else. I began to feel nervous just before the ceremony started. After meeting Anna, I went upstairs in the hopes of feeling better before going back. I had no idea that Rachel had been following me. I went to the bathroom because I felt weird and sweaty. My water suddenly burst. It was a real deluge. Immediately, panic struck. My baby had arrived at the worst possible time, despite the fact that I love her more than anything. I was attempting to think clearly while crouched in agony when Rachel suddenly materialized in front of me. We had to get to the hospital, so I ordered her to grab my phone and call Rick right away. Rachel escorted me to the restroom and took a seat for me. I trusted her to act appropriately, so I gave her my phone. She lost it at that point. Because she didn't want me to steal Anna's spotlight, Rachel said she would make sure Rick arrived after the ceremony. Shocked, I questioned if she was crazy and told her that I couldn't endure this for an hour. She took the phone with her and locked me in the bathroom when I tried to get it back. There I was, sitting on a toilet in a restroom, in labor, very pregnant, without a spouse or phone. I managed to avoid having a full-blown panic attack. What might have happened if I had is unknown to me. I stood up and walked to the door, yelling for assistance and hammering on it. However, nobody heard me because everyone was sitting for the wedding and the restroom was on the first level. I yelled until I could no longer be heard, but nobody arrived. At that point, I genuinely believed that I would pass away and that my child would follow me in death. I finally passed asleep, exhausted, sweating profusely, and without a voice. I don't recall anything else after that. Hours later, I awoke in the hospital. Rick was crying beside me. It took me a moment to figure out where I was and what was going on. I expected the worst when I saw Rick crying, and everything that had happened to me before, Rachel locking me in the bathroom and my calls for assistance, came flooding back. I believed May had not arrived. When Rick saw I was awake, he let out a breath of relief and began sobbing in my arms. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach and felt overpowered. The nurse then entered carrying a baby girl. I let out a sigh of comfort. There will never be a better moment than the first time I held my baby. Since I didn't have the energy to digest everything at that point, I was thankful that Rick didn't give me any details. I could hear some noise outside the hospital room, though. Rick explained that his mother was outside and wanted to come in to see her granddaughter when I asked him what was happening. I filled him in on everything, including Rachel's actions and how she needlessly put our daughter in risk. Furthermore, I made it plain that I would never permit her to get close to my daughter. She was dead to me. Rick said he already knew everything and nodded. Rachel had sobbed and told him everything when he discovered me in that way. I informed him that I would not forgive her because of her breakdown. Rick chuckled and declared that Rachel was dead to him as well from this moment on. He declared that he would go to court to make sure she was punished and that he intended to prosecute her with endangering her life. I felt as though a burden had been removed when I heard that. Rick and his brothers all love his mother, so I know that he does, but I wasn't in the mood to forgive her after what she had done, which might have cost me and May our lives. Our marriage would have been finished if Rick had sided with his mother instead of me. After that, there would have been no turning back. Given everything she had given up to raise them, I secretly feared he might support her. However, Rick defended me, and I am very appreciative. If it's possible, it increased my love for him. I inquired about Rick's wedding experience. "It's okay," he answered, adding that Anna and Emma were waiting for his call to come see us. He laughed and assured me not to worry when I inquired if Anna was upset. When Anna said that May's birth was the greatest present she could have gotten on her wedding day, she was ecstatic and beaming with pride. I cried when I heard that, and I told Rick to call them right away. Jonah, Emma, and Anna arrived to the hospital in a matter of minutes. The finest aspect? Jonah and Anna were still dressed for their wedding. There was no way Anna was going to miss the opportunity to take a wedding photo with her niece. I began to cry. It was a very touching moment. I apologized to Anna for spoiling her day after the photo. She gave me a big hug and told me that I was mistaken and that I had brightened her day. After that, I informed Anna about Rachel's actions since we made the pregnancy public. The only thing I did wrong, according to Anna, was not notifying them sooner. She was enraged. She thought that Rachel's drama could have been avoided. Emma added that any amount of trouble was okay as long as I was safe after I clarified that I didn't want to start any. My eyes still well up with tears as I type this. I realized then that they actually loved me as a member of their family, not simply Rick's wife. One of the most amazing people I've ever met is Anna. She's safe, kind, and incredibly happy. Understandably, she has achieved great success in life. How Rachel becomes so different from her kids is beyond me. It seems as though they chose to act in the exact opposite way after witnessing her actions. It's strange, but I no longer give a damn. The moment was lovely. Rachel, meanwhile, remained outside. On the walk-in, Anna assured her that she would personally see to it that Rick and I filed charges. I didn't want Rachel close to me, but she still wanted to come in to meet May. According to Anna, we must protect ourselves from Rachel. She also expressed regret, believing she had not done enough to clarify that she had no issue with my pregnancy or to allay her mother's overly protective tendencies. Anna thought that perhaps the incident could have been prevented if she had been more outspoken. I informed Anna that she was not at fault and that she had made me feel protected. Rick was outside conversing with Rachel the entire time. Rick shared his conversation with Rachel with me after I was released from the hospital and brought May home a few days later. He told her that nothing would alter his decision and that he would be filing charges. He also informed her that she was not regarded as May's grandma in any way and would never be permitted to be a part of her life. For a perceived offense that didn't even bother her, Rachel's actions had put our unborn kid and my life in risk. Additionally, Rick stated that he would drastically cut back on the financial assistance that Rachel had been receiving from him and Emma. Rachel broke down in tears at that time, saying she didn't deserve this treatment because she had slaved away her whole life for her kids. Rick strongly asserted that her acts did not provide her authority over their life, even though he respected the sacrifices she had made. He acknowledged that he had been overlooking or justifying her actions for years, but that was no longer the case with May and me. Given that Anna had never objected to my attending her wedding, Rachel had gone too far and demonstrated that she was dangerous to be around. After that, Rachel attempted to defend her behavior by claiming that she was attempting to keep Anna safe and didn't want me stealing the spotlight. However, Anna heard this and scolded Rachel, stating unequivocally that she had never felt that way. We are moving on with the lawsuit, but Rick is taking care of it because I can't handle the extra stress of caring for a newborn. Rick has stated unequivocally that none of the siblings are interested in continuing to be friends with Rachel. Emma only talks to her when it's absolutely necessary, and Anna has shut her off totally. Naturally, Rick and I are also no contact. Rachel probably didn't expect this backlash. As perverse as that seems, it's possible that she truly believed she was defending Anna. I'm not justifying her in the slightest, but I feel sorry for her since things went so wrong. I'm wondering now if we ought to discuss it with her. I feel awful and wrong about it, but perhaps I'm not thinking straight. I'm aware that Rick will become irate if I bring this up to him. He can't even look at Rachel at the moment since he is so angry with her. I didn't think this rift would be this deep, but here we are. First update, well, there is no possibility of reconciliation, never again. Being a new mother has kept me quite busy, which is why I haven't posted in a while. I haven't had much time for anything else because I've been so busy taking care of myself and my daughter. The good news is that we are all very enthusiastic about May's impending 8-week birthday. Rick and I have benefited much from the assistance of Anna and Jonah. Emma contacts us nearly every day, but she had to go back to work. Everyone's life are brightened by May, and her photos are all over our group chat. Rachel has not been contacted. Since we already have too much on our plate and filing charges would be pointless, I persuaded Rick not to do so. Since none of us has the energy to handle the matter at this time, Rick reluctantly consented. Rachel seemed appreciative when we informed her of this choice last week. I use the word appeared, because the woman is genuinely insane, and she soon revealed her true nature to everyone. Rick and I got up at around 1 a.m. last week. To a booming knock on the door. Rick went to open the door, but I fled and hid with May because I assumed it was a robbery. Although I could hear shouting, I was afraid to venture out for fear of waking May. My mother-in-law, Rachel, was the one who did it. According to Rick, she was acting irrationally, yelling that we couldn't keep her away and that she needed to see May. She finally backed off after Rick threatened to call the police. She had been attempting to enter the residence by force. We thought that something might be wrong with her and that everyone needed to know, so we contacted Emma and Anna right once. But our worry didn't last long. Rachel texted us unsettlingly the following day. She began by saying that we were punishing her for being a mother by denying her access to May, calling us nasty and horrid. The text soon became erratic and theatrical. She discussed the challenges of parenting 3 children and how she had to put one child's needs ahead of another at all times. She used the excuse that she didn't want May to ruin Anna's wedding to defend her actions on May's birthday. Rachel deliberately disregarded the fact that Anna had constantly emphasized that she had no issue with the pregnancy and wedding taking place at the same time, and that May was actually a fetus at the time. I initially made an effort to comprehend her viewpoint. Then, though, her text became more sinister. Rachel said that she was concerned that her children would no longer value her as much now that May was in our lives. She said that she had thought Anna would be angry about the pregnancy because, as she put it, that's what a normal woman would feel. However, she didn't like it when she saw us all thrilled about the wedding and the pregnancy. She wanted us to be envious and competitive instead of pleased that we were happy for each other. Rachel continued by saying that she felt devalued because May had replaced her as her children's unifying factor. She also said that she had anticipated Anna would snap at her for drawing attention away from the wedding because of May's birth. Rachel felt supplanted when it didn't occur and May was the only topic of conversation. I was no longer able to read by this time. Telling Rick that she was insane and dangerous for all of us, I requested him to ban her number. Since reading those texts, I've been suffering from a persistent headache. How a 50-year-old woman could compete with a 7-week-old infant is beyond me. I don't get it, and to be honest, I'm done attempting to figure out why she does it. Both Emma and Anna were similarly horrified when we shared Rachel's mails to them. They hypothesized that she might be experiencing a manic episode. Emma even volunteered to fly down and have a facility evaluate Rachel. I acknowledged that it was a smart concept, but I made it plain that I no longer wanted to interact with Rachel. Her actions were too risky and unpredictable. Second update, Rachel is currently the subject of a restraining order. We are exercising caution even though she hasn't tried anything since the late-night event. Emma carried out her plan, consulted a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and had Rachel tested. Although Rachel's behavior had no underlying medical cause, she was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. The next course of action recommended by the specialists was therapy. Emma made the decision to cut all communication with Rachel following this disclosure. She stated that she would be happy to assist if Rachel had a medical condition, but Emma can no longer put up with her now that it is obvious that her acts are motivated by hatred. I share this sentiment and fully comprehend it. If Rachel's behavior had been the result of a real mental illness, I might have felt some pity for her. But we can't make amends with her now that we know this is just who she is. The purpose of the restraining order is to protect Rick, May, and myself. Rachel has shown herself to be unsafe on 2 occasions, and her particular animosity against May makes her much more hazardous. We cannot compromise on keeping her away from our family. This, I believe, will be my last update. I hope I never have to talk about this whole experience again.